My name is
Jenny.
David.
Lila.
Laurel.
Jen.
Lisa.
Dino.
Ari.
Kyle.
I was a
Jehovah's Witness.
Jehovah's Witness.
FLDS.
In the Amish church.
The chosen people.
I was a Scientologist.
I grew up a Mooney, a member of the Unification Church.
2x2.
And I am
Shunned.
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 Stunned.
Shunned. My name is Jodi. I am 51 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I am shunned.
All right, Jodi. So how'd you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
I was born into this religion.
Okay. So then, do you know how far back it goes in your family?
Yes, actually, my parents are the first generation. When my mother she was either pregnant with my next oldest brother or she had just had him. Regardless, it was the summer of 1969, and she had Jehovah's Witnesses come to her door, and they told her that my brother would never go to kindergarten because the end was going to be coming before then. And I guess that was kind of her little hook.
Wow. I mean, that's that's quite an opening statement, isn't it? Your new child is never going to go to kindergarten. And of course, why were they saying that back then?
Well, the end of the system was going to be coming by then. So Armageddon was coming. Jehovah was going to destroy everything. And we also know that a lot of the culture at that time was teaching that sometime in the 1970s that the end was coming, that it was a true teaching that was being shared. And that was the first thing that was said to my mom at the door.
So right away, they're jumping into, of course, back then, they ended up with their little catchphrase, stay alive till 75. 1975, they calculated through whatever magic math that was going to be the end of the world. And so, you've got a new mom, vulnerable, new kid, being told that her child is not going to progress in a normal fashion because this thing is coming. That has to be, I guess, either terrifying and then perhaps heartening if she thinks she can then fix the situation by listening.
Absolutely. My mom and dad had just a few years earlier, they had built their home next door to my grandfather. And so she left a lot of her friends, even though it was, not that far away in the same little city and stuff like that. My mom didn't drive, so she was alone a lot. And at that time, there was 5 children. And so she was home with 5 children, whether they were in school or whatever, but that's what she was doing. And my mom had a rough and rocky childhood. And so she didn't have a lot of family of her own on her side who were around. So she had really the only family that my mom had was my dad's family. And there were cousins and her sisters were around, but I never understood it till later why we didn't have aunts and uncles around so much. Part of it was just the hard childhood that my mom went through, early divorce of her parents and stuff like that, which separated her and her sisters. Some went to Vermont, some stayed with my grandfather. And but she never shared her very hard story until I was maybe even within the last 10 years did she start to share things. But anyways, my mom was kind of alone, And so somebody coming to her house and talking to her and taking an interest in, her, and wanted to come back and visit. And they offered my mom a Bible study, of course, and it was with the Truth Book. I do know that. And so she set it up without even asking my dad. And she let my dad know. I think the way I remember it was they all sat down to dinner, and she told my dad that after dinner that two Jehovah's Witnesses were going to come, a husband and wife, and we're going to do a Bible study with her. And if he wanted to be there, he could be there. And my dad said nothing and got up from dinner, went in, showered, and she just thought, he's leaving. He's going to go wherever, see his brothers, whatever. And but he stayed, and he sat in on the Bible study with my mom. A side note with that is that his sister was a Jehovah's Witness, their sister and her husband, but they were not in the same town anymore or anything. They didn't weren't in that congregation, basically. So I think that part of it made it a little less intimidating for my dad, and maybe for my mom also. We've never discussed that part of it, but they started studying with this couple, and at some point, I'm going to guess probably in the as it continued, sometime probably in like 1970 or 71, my parents were baptized at the same time into the religion.
Wow, it's just really interesting that your dad just kind of rolled right into it. Just
Yeah.
the situation, the circumstances were such, and doesn't sound like there was much strife around it or anything. It was just, hey, yeah, let's do this thing, and they kind of went into it pretty easily.
Yeah. Yeah, if there was any, it was never discussed with us, which possibly might have just been the way that they protected the face of the religion. Was like, oh yeah, we were not gonna, this was the greatest thing ever. But yeah.
Okay.
So
at that time, you said that your older brother was born. So how many, did you have other older siblings or at that time?
Yes. My oldest sibling is my sister, who's 18 years older than me. And in between us, there's 4 brothers. So there was 6 children altogether.
So then you've got older siblings in the mix, and I guess your family was probably celebrating holidays and such. So do you know, was it difficult in the family to change traditions, or did it change the nature of the relationships in your family because now you're not celebrating all of these holidays with the grandparents or whoever else was around, even though it wasn't super tight family?
Sure. Like with regards to my mom's side, I mean, that side wasn't super tight, but my dad did have several brothers who lived in the area, and a couple sisters. And like I said, my grandparents lived right next door. And they had a great relationship with them. But I know it affected things. Part of the reason why my mom probably loved the religion so much was because on my father's side of the family, there was a lot of drinking. A lot. I mean, that's all they did. They loved to drink, and they loved to hang out and go fishing and drink and get together and drink. And that's what Christmas was and stuff like that. And, the limited pictures that we have of any Christmases, which I wasn't part of or anything, but everybody's hanging around and everybody's got a beer and stuff. And so that really kind of toggled that back for my dad, and they stopped spending that time with my dad's family. And to me, I didn't know anything different. I hadn't been born yet, but when I was born, and what I remember was these are just distant people, who are, every once in a while an uncle would stop up at the house and visit, but we did not have relationships with them. Now, my dad was the youngest of his siblings, and I'm the youngest of my siblings. So my cousins are like as old as my dad, so I didn't have little cousins to hang out with. Okay, so that some of my older siblings, they hung out with some of those cousins and stuff like that, but that was very foreign to me. A relationship with cousins was very, very foreign. Second cousins who came along, third cousins, those ones I had some relationship or knowing because they were closer to my age. But as far as it went, when I entered the picture, there really wasn't much family outside of our family. With regards to my brothers and sisters, speaking for my sister, mostly because, she was about 15 when they joined. She never accepted it. She went along with it. But yeah, everything was taken away from her. She lost family that she used to hang out with, and there was no more Christmas and there was no more birthdays. And you're just supposed to understand that this is the way it is. And so that was it kind of upset the apple cart for her a lot. One thing that we always did, though, and I'm sure others have brought this up, is my mom and dad's way of curbing that a little bit was to have gift days, surprise gift days,
the Christmas substitutes.
Exactly. That was hidden. We didn't say that. And like, I didn't know. I just thought that was something that our family did. But then, like, we found out later, that's what so many families did, especially ones who came in, like, just so that they had something for their kids. And so, yeah, we had that.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know about your family, but most witnesses celebrate Thanksgiving anyway. They just don't call it Thanksgiving. It is funny just to see how they do get right up to the edge of a lot of different holidays and then do kind of their own thing. They just maybe do it a few days later or a month later or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, we did not. We definitely did not celebrate.
Touch that one, huh?
No, we did not. No.
Interesting.
No.
That you're I think one of the rare families that I've talked to who did not. It seems like most of the families that I've talked to, or the family members I've talked to, have said that yeah, their family for years and years has always basically celebrated, and had a big turkey and all the trimmings and everything, but it was always just the day after, as if Jehovah can't be that easily fooled. So
well, and that was one of my little like memories that I wrote down, was the fact that Thursday evenings was one of our nights to go to the Kingdom Hall. And so I vividly remember one year driving to the Kingdom Hall and on Thanksgiving and actively looking in the windows as we drove down our road at people who had all these gatherings, of whether they're all in their living room or whether you could see them, kind of gathered around a table if they had their big windows open or, blinds open and things like that. And seeing that and just being like, what is so bad about this dinner? I mean, why couldn't we do this? Because it was one of the few things as a kid that in school I was allowed to draw a turkey, or I was allowed to make those little art crafts because it's a turkey, or it's a pilgrim. Well, it was a person and it's part of history. So it was one of those ones that I could get away with in school participating in, but we did not celebrate it.
Well, that's a good segue then a little bit into the worldview or how being raised for you, you were born into this thing. So how did it make you see the world around you being raised as a little Jehovah's Witness?
I've heard some people say that they were afraid of the world. I definitely was not. I was not afraid of the world. My parents didn't bring me up to fear it. But I guess to a degree, I was envious like that. Why can't we just have that dinner? And part of it too, I think, was I wanted the extended family that I didn't have. I wanted the cousins or the aunts and uncles to come and let's do a family dinner. Why don't we ever go to their house? And well, the reasoning was because they're worldly or whatever. But I didn't look at schoolmates like, oh, they're going to die. I didn't look at it that way. Like I couldn't, that they were bad and things like that. I guess I was, I've always been a little bit more of a merciful person. And I always sat there and thought to myself, yeah, I don't think he's going to kill them. I don't think he'll do that. I think he'll see that they're good people. I guess that has always been how me personally, not because my dad raised me that way or my mom raised me that way, but because I would always see the good in people.
Well, and so then the God that you worshipped, as you saw it, mirrored that feeling within you that it must be a merciful God. And certainly Jehovah's Witnesses, they speak out of all sides of their mouth. And so on one
Right.
hand, he's a God of mercy and a God of love, but on the other hand, he's going to do these horrible things.
Right.
And so it's very difficult to square that circle when you're a kid. That's a lot to try to figure out. Heck, it's hard as an adult the way they portray it. Their God Jehovah, this God of war who's just waiting to murder 8 billion people, right? So that
Right.
Jehovah's Witnesses, the 8 million of them, can live forever on a paradise earth. So that's not super loving. And
No,
so
it is not. It is not.
not a good testament to how many his might, other than that he can kill people but not attract people. And so it's just not a good look, and a very difficult thing for a child to try to digest. So I see that I can understand you're just a sweet kid saying, I can't see how God would kill all these other people who are nice.
Yeah. I believed it would happen and
Sure.
everything. But at the same time, I was like, what is portrayed in the publications and what is portrayed in, in our publications and what they speak on is of how terrible and awful the world is and the drugs and sex that are on every corner. And I'm like, I still haven't seen that, but it was, as a kid, I'm like, I haven't seen this happening, but I'm guessing it's out there. We just, so I guess I always felt like where we lived, we were in this, special little bubble, because obviously it's out there, but it's not here. So he's probably not going to do anything drastic here. These have to be good people, right? That
And
was
therefore why you weren't afraid of them either, because you weren't seeing a reflection of the messaging that was coming towards you as far as who quote worldly people outside of Jehovah's Witnesses were to be, you weren't
Yeah.
seeing that in reality. So
Yeah.
why be afraid of them?
Right. Right.
Hmm. Um, so let's talk then about some of these different areas of your life growing up. What was life like at home growing up? What was the temperature of the room? I don't know, how did things go in your family? Were you all the super diligent, zealous Jehovah's Witness family, or who were you all together as a unit?
Well, by the time I was, let's just say 5, to be able to have good memories of, life and moving forward, 2 of my siblings had moved out. My sister would have been, you know, my sister and older brother were in their, 20s, early 20s and things like that. And there was one, so I had 3 brothers at home, and we were at every meeting. We were Saturday morning service always. Usually Sunday, first Sunday of the month, out in service. That was the worst one. I hated that one. I don't know why. Mainly because I just wanted part of my, weekend to myself, I guess. I don't know. And my as early as I can remember, my father was an elder, and so we were always a lot of times we were the first to be at the Kingdom Hall because he was opening it up, and we were most of the time one of the last of the Kingdom Hall. He didn't always close it up, but we were, some of the last few who were there. So we were there for the long haul every time. Our little congregation was very old as far as, the age group. Now, my older siblings, when I was born, there were a few other families who had children who were around the same age as my brothers and my sister, but some of them moved away, and one of the families who did stay, they had a girl who was about my age, a couple years older, and but even though he was an elder in the Kingdom Hall, those kids were really kind of considered bad association. And so, but the older siblings were really, most of them had moved on and moved out. So when I was a kid coming up 5 years old, it was really just me and my brother, who was about 9 years older, and I'm sorry, 4 years older. So he would have been around 9 or whatever. And we were just kind of like the favored little kids. I mean, it was like going to grandma's house every weekend, because they were there and somebody always had gum, and we go to see this one lady, and she'd always have gum for us. And so we could, I was loved because I was little. I mean, I was cute. I was a cute little kid, and seriously, it was like going to an assisted living home. I mean, everybody was older, and so we brought life to that Kingdom Hall, just being little. And now, as some who were more like my older brothers ages, they started having kids, then there was kids coming along, but they were more like 10 years younger than me. So I had that little bit of an age gap in there where it was just us. And so we didn't have any Jehovah's Witness friends. Even school, my brother and I were the only ones in school. And when he moved on, left elementary school, I was the only one in my school, in the whole city. And so that was always weird. there was no camaraderie in that manner. But anyways, we were talking about home. Sorry. But
Oh, that's okay.
But as far as it was with home, you know, we had Monday evening family Bible study where we read whatever the reading was going to be for that Thursday night, and then we did this the Watchtower study for the following Sunday. And we could not, my brothers and I, we could not get through that fast enough because, you know, we just wanted our own time. We wanted to do our own things. And but life, I'd love to say that we were a happy family, but there was also a lot of hurt in the family because of the siblings who were older, and things that happened. You know, my sister pretty much moved out when I was born. And so I really, my sister was always more like an aunt to me, a second mom. I mean, being as old as she was, it was just a unique situation. And when she had a child who was 2 years younger than me, so it was just like, you know, I just felt like it was another mom coming in. She never accepted the religion. Like I said, she was never baptized, anything. Then my oldest brother, his name is Bob. Bob was at some point, maybe like 16, I think he was baptized into the religion. He still had a little bit of a wild side. I don't know a lot about it because I was very little. And but he at whatever point, probably sometime around 18, he was disfellowshipped. I don't know the circumstances around it and why he was. But I can tell you my first vivid memory of my brother was, at first I didn't know, I didn't really gather where I was. My mom and I went someplace and we were waiting for him, and pretty soon he came into the room. And what I realized was that we were meeting him in the jail at in our town, because my brother was had joined the army, and he had gone AWOL, and he tried to come home, and the police found him, and they were waiting for the MPs to come get him to take him back. And so I just remember seeing him there and just being with him, spending time with him. I don't think there was anybody in my life that I idolized more than my brother Bob. He was just larger than life, because he was larger than life. He even from my earliest memories, he was kind of the bad boy. But when he came home and when I would get to see him, it was like everything was right again. But anytime he came home, it was a quick visit. Rarely was there ever a dinner, because he was disfellowshipped. So my only memories of Bob have always been with him shunned. And and he has always worn that his entire life, because he never came back.
If you'd like some extra content, if you'd like to learn more about our guests today, maybe even have an opportunity to connect further with them, you can do so by joining the Backroom tier at patreon.com/shunned. what does it mean? So when you think of Bob, you got to have those interactions with him, though it's albeit brief, it sounds. Uh, what did it mean to you when you look back on that? Is that a strictly fond memory? Was it bittersweet that because obviously you cared about Bob and wanted to see him, but he could only show up for a short period of time before it sounds like he was ushered away or whatever the case may be because he was supposed to be shunned.
Mhm.
Were you super excited that you got to see him? Was that enough, or do you think that in any way did that help you to see that maybe this wasn't the truth because it was because it was so hurtful on some level?
I think at that point, I mean, first off, it was like I said, he was always larger than life. My time with him was always amazing. It was the best day, type of thing. And maybe we would get to see him for parts of a week. So like rushing home from school and hoping he was going to be there. Hearing his motorcycle drive up my parents' long road and knowing he's coming home. And, you know, and, um, my parents never said, you can't talk to him, you can't do things to him or with him. And most of the time, my brother like lived out of state or something and would come home for these little bits. There was a little bit of time, maybe when I was around 12, 10, 12, somewhere like that, where he did come back and he was living in our small town. As far as it went with Bob, because I had from the very beginning of any type of memory, he was disfellowshipped. My thought process with Bob was always that he had to have done something wrong that was, wrong in the eyes of Jehovah, and he was choosing not to be better. He was choosing not to be repentant. So while I wanted to have that relationship with Bob, I was under the understanding that he had done something bad. And I don't know that it was just him joining the military. It seems like something happened before that. Don't know, but I mean, who knows?
I mean, regardless, there's no reason to shun someone. That's just a
exactly,
JW thing. But
exactly right.
so it sounds like we're very conflicted to some degree because on one hand, Bob was the best thing in the world. You loved having Bob around. But on the other hand, he must be bad in some way because he's disfellowship. So he must have done something to upset Jehovah or the family or the congregation. And so you wanted him around, but also you were okay on some level with the fact that it was limited?
Yeah, I understood.
You understood.
Okay,
Yeah. Again, it's
was
complicated, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. I mean, I wasn't okay with it because I wanted more,
Sure.
but I understood. It was sad when he'd leave, but I understood.
Yeah,
I didn't. I didn't argue with my parents. I'm like, why can't we just have him for dinner? Why can't we just do this? And so, but yeah.
well, because I mean, isn't that the nature of most people who are shunned? Their relationship with their family is uh mom and dad cares about us as much as they can. They love us on a
Hmm.
level, but it's not true love because they can't love us for who we really are in the end.
Right.
They care about us up until the point that it conflicts with this Jehovah's Witness standard or whatever, and
Hmm.
then suddenly they have to just cut it off. And like you said, it's kind of an intellectual thing. Like they just understand that, well, I care about them, but they did this thing, so I can't see them anymore, and that just is how it is, and they just accept it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very cold line. It's very intellectualized, and their emotions just kinda they try to dull or stop their emotions there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how they all get by,
Right.
because it's not natural.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so, did you in your family, did you all have good times? Did you go on vacations? Did you all interact outside the Jehovah's Witnesses part of it? Did you all interact well? Did you have good times? Was it a loving home? Did you feel safe?
Yes, well, we did a lot of vacations. Like once a year, we would do a family vacation in the summer. Once a year, in April we would take a trip down to see my aunt and uncle who were Jehovah's Witnesses who lived down in. They were in Kentucky. They were in Tennessee. They always went wherever the need was greater in the South, and so they were regular pioneers. He was an elder, so we would do that. I mean, we did do a lot of fun things. And my when it's not the same as it is now. I mean, when I came along, my mom was 38, and like that was old back then for people to have kids, and now people are having kids, just starting families at 38 years old. But I always felt like my parents were old, and probably that wasn't necessarily that they were old, but they were just worn out, tired by the time their sixth kid came along, and so but we did special things as a family. We would go for rides. The state park was close by to our home, and we would go for rides in the park. We would Saturday nights. We would sometimes have my older brother over, and who was the only Jehovah's Witness, um, and his wife, and we'd have pizza nights and play cards or something like that. So we did have a loving home. I did feel loved. I did feel cared for. There was no neglect in our home. My father was a Marine before he became a Jehovah's Witness, and he took care of his family. And my mom she was a stay-at-home mom, and she always provided a loving home, a clean home, a happy home as best she could for her kids. The unhappiness that ever came was usually based around the religion and rebellion that happened on the parts of siblings. And
Such as the duality of the nature of even the best relationships with Jehovah's Witnesses. You can have great moments with people. Even a lot of people obviously have situations where there's a lot of overt abuse and such, and
mhm.
that can be the case. But there are, even in the best situations where you have this loving home and people are getting along and you're having a great time, there's still this thing sitting in the corner. Though it's not
Yes.
really even in the corner, right? It's front and center, I guess, every day.
Yeah.
And it is the thing that ultimately often ends up destroying these loving families,
Mhm.
tearing people apart, and it's really
Yeah.
sad that that thing has to get in the way of all these other potentially good things.
Right. Absolutely. It seemed like when I was growing up that I might have had a skewed view of this, but it always seemed like my siblings had worldly friends,
Mm,
like who would come and, like, my brother, next oldest brother, his best friend lived down the street, and so he would come over a lot, and um or they go there after school and stuff like that, and everybody had a friend. But I never was really allowed to have that person, that friend who could come over, or I could go over there. I'm thinking probably the rebellion that happened with my siblings since I was the baby kept my parents going, no, you can't. Though I mean, I could probably count on my hand the number of times I went to somebody else's house from school, and it always revolved around we had a project to do, which it was a 2-person project, and we had to do it. And so that was it. I never went to anybody else's friends, anybody else's house. And I would sometimes have, one friend over, but in it, maybe it started for a little bit that once a month somebody did, or every 3 months somebody came over, but somehow it was always shut down. Like, well, she is worldly and she is this, so we shouldn't be doing that. And I'd be like, what about what about his friend? He's here all the time, and it can't just be because he lives down the street.
Do you think any of it might also have been because you were a girl?
Probably.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. But because of that, I mean, I had a very strong imagination. I probably still do. And I didn't have friends outside of school, but boy, I had a lot of imaginary friends, and we spent a lot of time in the woods where I grew up. And, I was always outside. I was always playing and, doing things like that. We raised our own chickens and things like that, and something I always did with my dad. And so that was like the best time in the world, was being able to have these little creatures that I got to take care of and love on, even though I knew they were meant for food. I respected that they were going to live here for a few months, and then we were going to process them to feed our big family. And but it was one of the, if there was a key memory in my life that was always a happy memory, it was my mom coming in my room in the morning and saying, the post office called, the baby chicks are here. And I had a job, and I had to go get the brooder ready while my dad went and got the chicks. And then it was something that we did together. We got the babies out, and I was always allowed to be late for school that day. And it was just special. And so home was special, and home was good. And but there was always that thing that sat behind us, and it was I mean, when I was little, I wasn't necessarily rebellious, but I was told of my brother's rebellion and my sister's rebellion, not really understanding that most of the time they just wanted to be kids.
So then did that put a lot of pressure on you to not rebel?
Yeah, it did. I always tried to be a good girl. While I understood that, just as you did, that I'm not going to go to college. School was still important. I still was always an achiever who was like, if I'm going to take this test, I want to do the best I can on it. I wasn't a slacker at that. And so I was always trying to be better, so that my parents were happy. I wanted to make my parents happy. I didn't want them to worry about me. I knew they did. And I also thought, if I act perfect in all these other ways, then when something comes along that I want to do that they might second guess, maybe they'll just do it because they think they can trust me.
That makes sense. That adds up. You just, we all, and at the end of the day, even the quote rebellious kids, we all just wanted to make it's normal to want to make mom and dad happy. We all want love, validation. We want our parents to be proud of us in some way.
Mhm.
And that's a very normal human desire. That's not necessarily unhealthy. What's unhealthy is the way that we have to go about it, which in this case, often in the case of Jehovah's Witnesses, is we have to be somebody that we're not in order to make them happy, and
Mhm.
that's where things tend to start to break down. So, did you have? So you didn't have any friends. It sounds like at the Kingdom Hall, or really like around in your neighborhood or anything. Did you form any friendships at school? Was that a place where you got to connect to other kids at all? I know you couldn't connect to them on, except for maybe on projects, but did you at least feel, because it just sounds like you're so isolated here in a lot of ways. Did you at least feel connections to the kids at school?
I did. There were some kids that, I mean, I was social. I mean, I went and I felt like I was a nice person and then a nice kid. And so I did have friends. And I've um actually some of our friends I've continued with through Facebook and continued now that we're still friends. And we you know, there was always things that we those who connected with more. And it was sometimes hard being a Jehovah's Witness. And I mean, I could in school I could do enough to get by as far as a Jehovah's Witness, and then be able to just be quote normal among friends and stuff like that. And so I was never, well, I can't say I was never treated poorly because I was a witness, but I did have certain friends who I could be friendly with. And when I was in school and there were events that would happen, um, like Valentine's Day party or the Christmas party or something like that. There was one friend in particular, and who was, even to this day, like I said, is still a friend. She still lives back home, and she was somebody who would always be willing to do stuff different for me. Um, we would like if there was a Christmas party, and this was an okayed thing by my mom, that we could actually have, while the Christmas party happened, when it was over, she and I could exchange a non-Christmas gift.
Hmm.
And that was okay with my mom, that we could do it. It was not a Christmas gift. It was a friend gift. And she was okay with that. And she understood that what I was going to give her was a friend gift. And, and, um, and that was okay. And I appreciated that because it gave me the thing that I was missing, that I loved. And whenever there was a party at school or whatever, there was this woman who was like I honestly don't know what her job was, but she was like I think she was like the assistant to the man who was in charge of like special education at our elementary school. My mom cleaned her house, and um, during these parties, I was allowed to go to her office and visit with her. And granted, because of how I was being raised in at the Kingdom Hall with all these old ladies and everything, that was right up my alley. I was like, I can go sit with her. I can carry on a normal conversation, whatever. I wasn't being put out in the hallway outside the door while I listen to parties happening inside. And then so I it was, and she always had a little something, a little treat for me waiting. she'd be like, even though you can't, I have this for you. And, you don't have to tell your mom. And which was always funny. And so even though those things happened, I still felt like, to a degree, I had something to look forward to. And if it was a Valentine's party when I came back, since most of the kids in the room didn't understand that I didn't celebrate, there was always Valentine's on my desk waiting for me, and I just put them away. And when I went home, I'd open them, and most of the time I had to throw them away. But my mom was not so crazy religious about stuff like that that if I said, hey, can I cut this picture of this kitten out, and out of the Valentine and use it, she would allow things like that. So even though I didn't celebrate, there was something that was special and soft about the landing, so to speak, and it made those things okay.
Yeah, it sounds like your parents weren't super rigid like some parents.
Correct. Yeah. Because even with my brothers who were disfellowshipped, there was not a 100% shunning. There was we're not going to do dinners, but if you come to the house, I will talk to you. But my brothers also knew we probably can't stay long. Treated it in that way.
Right.
And I guess
it's still not healthy, but it wasn't as strict as
right.
most situations.
Right.
So with yourself, did you attach to the things at the Kingdom Hall? Did you really believe, quote, the truth? Did you attach to the doctrines? Did you like to go out and preach to people and try to save them, or to give talks or things like that? Were you really attaching much to the organization and the doctrines?
Yes, 100%. I believed it was the truth. I knew no different. I honestly couldn't understand why my sister would, leave it and not believe that it was the truth. I mean, how can you not? I don't know exactly when I became an unbaptized publisher, but I was always, like I said, always in the door-to-door work. Did I love it? No. No, I really would like to sit home and watch cartoons. I mean, let's just be real. I loved coffee breaks. I mean, that was real fun. But I had an app. I had a paranoia. I was okay going with whoever to the door, but I had a great fear of speaking to somebody and carrying on the conversation, even though over and over again, whenever the new magazines came out, I always had a practice, and I practiced what I was going to say and things like that. But I just had an absolute fear of doing it. And this is something we can get to later, but I did feel there was a bit of pressuring that was like, well, you have to be able to do this if you want to get baptized, and you have to be able to talk at the doors. In the congregation, I had no problem doing talks, being the householder or the publisher, didn't matter. I could do any of it. I would say I excelled. When it comes to public speaking, I'm very comfortable. I don't have a problem. And I found that in doing those talks, I loved acting. I mean, this was so much fun. We get to do a performance, you know. and
Yes.
so I mean, that was what I looked at, how I looked at it. And I wanted to, I do not remember all of the like when the whoever the theocratic ministry school teacher was or whatever, when he would counsel you afterwards to tell you whether you got your little points that you should be working on, whether it's gestures, which I'm very good at, or you know, pausing and things like that. I don't think I ever got anything but the top one that you could get. I never got a needs improvement or anything like that.
I think
I
you got
was
a
all
G for good, didn't you? Isn't that what
that
it
might have
was?
been it. There was
Yeah.
a G, there was maybe a work on needs. I can't
Yeah.
remember, but yeah, I was always moving on to the next thing.
Okay.
So, and whenever there was the need for in the second half of the school, whenever there was a need for, you know, we're gonna show an example of how to present this book or at the door, and I was always somebody that they called on to volunteer for it because I was willing. It didn't scare me. I would do it. And I while I would have loved to have had a Tuesday night at home and just be able to do school, or a Thursday night at home and just, you know, watch TV or do whatever I wanted to do, when I was there, I made the most of it.
If you're feeling stuck in your life after cult involvement and can't find the life you want, leaving a cult is a new beginning on a path to healing, not some magical end itself that is healing. Relief from the immediate pain feels good at first, but that's not necessarily true happiness. The feelings of social awkwardness and isolation, lack of self worth, perfectionism, patterns of being attracted to emotionally unavailable people, not even knowing who you are yourself. All of these things and more are lingering effects of that environment. Being in a cult isn't just following a doctrine, but it's following a culture, a way of life, a way of being that doesn't just go away because you stopped attending meetings. If you want to shortcut the path to healing instead of trying to figure it out on your own, maybe even work with me professionally in my cult recovery coaching practice, you can find opportunities to do that and also for other cool resources at my website, exjwhelp.com. That's exjwhelp.com. Yeah, you can see that it sounds like a lot in what you've talked about so far. As a kid, you were making the most of whatever it was.
Hmm.
You were taking even the teachings as far as Jehovah's Witnesses and the way they would see maybe how people on the outside were going to eventually be dealt with by Jehovah. For you, it was, oh no, I'm going to see this in the best way possible. I'm going to choose to see this in a merciful way.
Hmm.
uh, you seem to be making the most of even not being able to do the holidays at school or whatever. There was
Hmm.
always something, it seems like, that you could kind of anchor to and try to make it as positive an experience as you could. You really did impact probably the experience that you had through this fairly positive, happy outlook that it sounds like you just naturally somewhat had.
Yeah, yeah. So and so for me, that, like I said, like with my siblings, I could never really understand, like, why are you guys like not just okay with everything, you know? But um but I hadn't reached the point of being a teenager and um independence and things like that, where they all had. And so um so yeah, I guess I was still fairly innocent to
Well,
life.
it's not even just innocence. It is, but I liked what you just said a second ago. Why are you guys not just okay with everything?
Hmm.
And it sounds like for you, just whether it was your makeup or a response to the environment that you were in, for you, you just did your best to make the best out of whatever it was that came your way, and you made it okay. You were okay with whatever. You found a way to go along with it, to make it fit, to make it the happiest you could make it, which not everybody is naturally prone to be able to do.
Yeah. We had because we were an older congregation, we had a lot of, um, there was people who were brought in to liven it up. We had, pioneer couples who moved in and who were younger and things like that. And I naturally just clung to them. And they were like, look at this, little girl who's so excited to go out in field ministry and stuff. And I can tell you, it wasn't that I was excited to go out in field ministry. I was like, hey, look, here's somebody who wants to be my friend. Here's somebody who's taking an interest in me. And so, yeah, I'll do it. If you're telling me we're going to go, if you invite me to go out in the door-to-door work, I'm going to do it. If you invite me to go skydiving, I'm going to do it. It didn't matter. I just wanted to go. But more than likely, it just revolved around going out in the field ministry. And so my brother, who was a little older, that wasn't his cup of tea. He wasn't like, if they invited, hey, come along with us, he'd be like, I'll go Saturday when I have to. I would go anytime, because it would just, it was the camaraderie and the friendship and somebody besides my parents that I could spend time with and do things. And it was people who my parents would allow me to be with. So yeah,
Desire for community, and you
100%.
finding it. I don't know if this has always been the case with you, but I know that for a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, myself included, I've always somewhat gravitated more towards friendships with folks that were older than me,
Hmm.
instead of necessarily my peers, because I grew up with a lot of older folks in my Kingdom Hall as well. And I could talk to anybody at any level or age, and I seemed to always have a lot of older friends, still do to some degree. Also, I have a
Yeah.
lot of younger and peers today. I have a much more diverse group of friends since leaving, but you're kind of, when you're raised in a kid with a lot of older ones around you, or people to have as friends, that there's not a lot of peers, or you're discouraged from hanging out with your peers because they might not be seen as the best associates inside the congregation. Yeah, you learn to talk to people who are 20 years older than you most of the time.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. Within our family, I think there was a defining event that happened. And in my life, I think it's probably one of the most defining events. And it changed the trajectory, I believe, of our family. And this involved my brother David, who is 10 years older than I am. And so he was of, so he was, he had never been baptized. David was, he went along, with, everything. And he was part of the theocratic ministry school and things like that. He'd give talks when he had to, whatever. But David started to live a little bit more of a darker life. And in our home, my parents had a very small little ranch style home. And it was 3 bedrooms. And then at some point, and 3 bedrooms and there's 6 kids. And so at some point, they built a small room in the cellar that was a bed, became like a bedroom for whoever was the oldest sibling. And at that time, there was 3 kids left at home, and my brother David was the oldest sibling. He had that room. David had a very close friend named Darren, and Darren this was another one of those situations where it was like, how does he get a friend? But I can't have one. But but Darren became like a family member of ours. He was about a year and a half younger than Dave was, and he was like a brother to me. He would go to the Kingdom Hall with us, and that was kind of like, I think that was one of the reasons why he was allowed to stick around, was because he would go to the Kingdom Hall with our family. And not that he ever tried to make anything of himself and become a Jehovah's Witness. He just attended. But that was enough for my family. Darren spent a lot of time with our family, stayed with us, over summers and stuff like that. And I guess from all that I kind of remember, he kind of didn't have the best life at home. And so there was something about us that provided a little bit of stability. And so this was the summer that I was in between 3rd and 4th grade. And when I would go to bed at night, I always slept with my door cracked about this big. And the light from my parents, from them in the living room, always shined in. It shined directly on my face, and it was a comfort for me to be able to fall asleep. Okay. And that was usually just how I fell asleep. The door never got shut, and that light always meant safety. So
Light of sorts.
Exactly. I was able to fall asleep and everything. In the middle of the night, one night, the light came on. It was very bright. And I'm like, there's not supposed to be a light on at this time. But it woke me. I heard voices. I heard my mother. I heard my brother, David. I heard him crying. And then but I also heard voices that were not family. I didn't know who they were. And, but I knew enough to know, don't go out there. And so I didn't. I laid there and I waited, and eventually I fell asleep. And the next morning I got up and I walked out, and my mom was sitting at the dining room table, and she just had her hands down in her head, and I came to her, and she said that there had been an accident the night before, and that Darren was dead. And what had happened was my brother and Darren had gone out for his 17th birthday and celebrated, and they got drunk. They were with other people. They were driving home to my house, where they were just going to sneak in and go to bed. And one of the guys who they had been partying with came up alongside my brother and decided to drag race him up our street. And there was a car parked that would have made it so 2 couldn't go past. And as my brother, one of them started to slow down because they couldn't go any farther, their 2 parts of the car hooked together. They got that close together, and it sent my brother off into a telephone pole. And my brother was thrown from the car, and Darren went through the windshield. And apparently my brother came to, didn't know where he was, what had happened. He was in shock, and he walked home, and he went into his room, and he went to bed. And so the police were called because by whoever who knew that something had happened. They went, they saw it was my brother's car, and we were enough of a small town that the police chief knew all of us, especially our family and our name because of my brother's, and knew that was my brother's car, but could not tell whether that was my brother who was through the windshield. And so he came to my parents' home and knocked on the front door. I'm guessing it's probably about 3 a.m. My mom and dad went, and they asked if David was home, and my dad said, "I don't know." He says, "Buddy," he left to go down to see if my brother was downstairs. And my mom said to the police chief, what's happened? And he said, "There's been an accident down the street, and there's a young man dead, and we don't know if it's Dave or not." And I could just imagine my mom as a mom. I could just imagine, my mom, and how that must have just about brought her to her knees. How thankful she probably was when my brother turned the corner and came up the stairs, but also knew that meant that it was Darren, and also meant that my brother was in a lot of trouble. And so that is what I woke up to. David was, I believe he had a concussion, and he really did not understand what had happened. But he was taken to the jail. My dad went with him and everything. And it was a lot of a mess. We only, within the congregation, David was, obviously arrested. He was charged with vehicular homicide. There was some sort of a murder charge, but I don't remember what it was. It obviously wasn't first or whatever, but there was a murder charge that went along with it, along with at that time it was DWI, wasn't DUI, and all these things. My father was an elder, and then the only other elder within the congregation was basically the one who would have to decide anything. My dad was removed almost immediately from being an elder. And this one elder, he's the one who I said his kids were always the bad association. I couldn't really do anything with the daughter or anything. Even though David was never baptized, he said that what he did was so terrible, so awful, so heinous, that he should be treated as though he is disfellowshipped. And that was what was told to the congregation. And so David was treated as a disfellowshipped person. I believe that accident, whenever that accident happened, probably within 2 days, David was arrested, but he was released on bond. Within 2 days, he was at the Kingdom Hall, and he was sitting in the back. And I can just remember his face, because he was so bruised. He had scars all over from glass. And he just lost his best friend, only friend. And he was shunned completely by everyone. And I remember looking at that situation and going, this isn't right. I'm third grade, but this isn't right. This is not how Jehovah would treat us. And I was like, maybe that's that part of me that's always merciful speaking it, but it was pivotal to me to say nothing about this moment is right. He needs everybody to love on him and to hug him and say, we will stand with you and we will support you no matter what's about to happen, no matter if you go to jail or the funeral that you're going to have to attend or anything like that. No matter what, we will support you. The emotional and physical trauma that he went through, he was shunned. And yes, he did a really, really dumb thing. He did. He should not have been driving when he was drinking. That was wrong on every level, not even within the religion. And he knows that, but it was a mistake.
We're going to compound.
Exactly. So
Wow.
My father was removed. Our life in our little small town, people would drive past our house and David killed the captain of the football team. And he was not only shunned in the religion, but we were treated so badly within the town. And
I was gonna say, like, and I understand why people would be upset
Sure.
and such, but so it sounds like his community, David's community, shunned him as far as the congregation went, and then it sounds like that then got compounded even by the fact that then you guys were treated differently in the congregation as well. The
Yes.
whole family is now some sort of pariah because of this, but also the community at large outside of Jehovah's Witnesses, that small community was also turning on you guys.
Yeah.
As a whole.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't a fun.
So it wasn't like just Darren's family or something, which
Right.
obviously you understand why they would be upset.
Sure. I mean, Darren could have been the one driving. It just happened to be that it was Dave's car.
This
They were
dumb
both
17-year-old stuff.
Exactly. They were both doing something wrong. And the other car is what really caused the accident. But it was a compound of everything. So he was treated as a disfellowship person. And that elder, since another elder didn't come in and he was the only elder, he's really running everything. He left David in that state for a very, very, very long time. And I don't know why. I'm sure David wrote letters. I was just a kid. I can just assume that he wrote a letter.
What is the process for that? Because this guy just made this up.
Exactly. And so at some point, another elder was assigned to our congregation. He came in, he met with my parents and he met with David, and probably within 2 months, in my mind, I don't remember everything perfectly, he was brought back in.
You know what strikes me about that is, so let's take that situation and flip it a little bit. Had it been that Jehovah's Witnesses were witnessing at the local county jail to a murderer, a pedophile, anything, it doesn't matter, and they started witnessing to that person inside prison, jail, whatever, and that person decided to show interest in, quote, the truth, they would immediately be accepted.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Immediately. There would have been no letters. They're not going to be shunned or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
But because he had grown up around it, he has to be punished. He has to be treated differently.
Mhm.
And the empathy goes out the window.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And David never, I mean, he came back in, you know, when he finally was allowed, you know, to talk again, when the shunning was lifted, which was a shunning unlike any that I've ever even heard of, but it happened. And you know, I'm guessing that after a little while, my dad was able to come back as an elder, because I know that he did. And but David at that point was never the same. He did not end up, you know, going to jail for a time. He was on parole and different things like that. So it
Also,
ended up
he didn't get a sentence where he had to go to prison for X amount of years.
exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
that didn't happen. Um,
So there was mercy shown to some degree by the
yeah,
world outside.
yeah, by the outside. A lot of it had to do with the fact that it was the second car involved that,
Sure.
um, and stuff. So, uh, anyways, but that was just a really defining moment for me, and as for our family, but for me to I had never questioned anything that the religion had ever done before or elders had ever done before, and I just like, this isn't right. This was not right. This he should have been held and allowed to grieve with people who loved him. That was the place where he should have had the most love out of anybody, and he wasn't getting that. Um, and from that time on, David was never the same. And
Can I ask, did David ever get any help? Obviously the people around him were not, but I mean, did he ever get any therapy around it or anything? Did anybody push for any help for David?
no, no,
Yeah,
no, no, that would no.
that's the JW way.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. I don't know if I know at different times on and off, different people studied with him. Again, you know, when he left home,
The answer to everything.
yes, yeah, people studied with him and things like that. Um, and, but that was it. I don't remember him. I don't really remember having much memory of him living at home after. I know he was living with us during his shunning, but at some point after that, he moved out. He was always at odds with my dad, and so he moved out, and but lived in the same little town that we all lived in. And so then it was just my brother and I at home, and he uh, um, my second oldest brother, he married his high school sweetheart, who wasn't a Jehovah's Witness when they were dating, but became a witness. And then they got married, and he went on and lived his life. He was the I don't upset the apple cart in any way type of person. And anyways, he was somebody I loved and admired. And after my grandfather died, he moved in next. He and his wife bought my grandfather's old farmhouse next door to my parents, so they were always in close proximity to us. my older brother, or I'm sorry, my next oldest brother, who lives, it was just the two of us at home, and he um, he did get baptized. I don't remember. I never ever can remember him actually ever being like all gung ho for the religion. I think he did it. Possibly he was pressured to, you're old enough, you should be
You're
doing this.
always pressured. I mean, even if your
Always pressured. Yeah.
family's not directly pressuring you, the organization, the talks, the magazines, they're always pressuring kids.
100%. 100%. He was, that is a very, very true statement. But he got baptized. He did his theocratic ministry school, Bible study or whatever, whenever he was called on for the talks. I remember one of the last talks he did. He really had, I think he was really out of the religion, so to speak. And it was the Bible reading. And he walked up there and he opened the Bible and he read it and he walked off. And he didn't have an opening or a closing or anything. And, all the things that you're supposed to have to be able to create a talk. He just did that. I don't ever remember him doing another one. And he moved out. He was living someplace else when I entered high school. So our high school was 7th through 12th grade. So when I entered, there was no middle school. It was all attached. So he was there, but he was living someplace else with somebody else. And I believe at some point along the line, he was disfellowshipped. I know at some point he was living with my brother, Bob, even when he was in school. He did graduate and everything, but
was that his choice to move out, or was he pushed out? Do you know?
He would not, unless he and my father, my parents had a disagreement that said, if you're not going to do this, then you need to leave. I don't know. That's a possibility. But that's his story, and I don't know that much about it other than, I just know I'd see him at school and I'd miss him, and, when are you coming back? And like that type of thing. He ended up, after graduating, he joined the Army for a small time, and then he was honorably discharged because of medical issues with his feet. I don't know. Sometime in between then and maybe 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, he was reinstated. But he told me, I only did this so I could talk to my family. And then at whatever point, he just faded out of the religion. So he's there, but he's in the town still, but he has not been disfellowshipped. But he's just there.
My original podcast, This JW Life, is my story, which started all of this. You can listen to it today on podcast apps and find more at thisjwlife.com. Or if you're interested, you can read my book, Becoming Jehovah, online for free at becomingjehovah.com. So it's interesting. The interview thus far has been somewhat, because I think we're going to start getting to more of your story, but it's really a family story, and it's you growing up as this kid, watching your family and all of these older, older siblings, watching in the third grade these big things going on, watching watching your family disintegrate in a lot of ways, which is had to have been really hard for I'll just again go back to third grader to put together or to understand. How did you understand your family to be when you were growing up and all of this? I mean, did you just keep using the whole kind of notion of that, like the JW lens of, I guess people must be doing something bad and having to go away, or and the intellectualizing of that, or was this just crushing for you all the time?
Yeah, I guess it was crushing. You know, I didn't want to be the last one at the house all by myself, and I wanted that little thing that I saw when we would pass by on Thanksgiving, and we look in and you see all those family members, you know, around a table, or you know, all these cars parked in the driveway. I wanted that, and where, you know, and you know, one by one, everybody's going away. And so, yeah, it was crushing. And it was like, but at the same time, I'm just like, this is their choice. And they know that they've done something wrong. Do I agree? No. Do I just want them to come and sit at dinner? Yeah, I really do. I really, really do. And so at whatever, when there, I remember when I was 12 and I was watching everything happen with my brother. So here he is, 16, going on 17. And I remember watching those things happen. I know that my father was removed as an elder again, because of my brother's things that was happening. And the sadness that brought, I mean, there was one circuit overseer who was one of the ones who made the defining choice to this last time to remove my father as a circuit overseer, or I'm sorry, as an elder. And my father, when that happened, it changed my dad, so that, you know, we used to be always the first at the Kingdom Hall and last to leave. When that happened and the circuit overseer came into town, I sat there the night that we should be there for the first circuit overseer meeting, and I'm like, are we going? You know, and even my mom didn't know if we were going because my dad was hanging back. And eventually we did. I think we probably walked in, if it started at 7, we probably walked in at 6:58. And I was like in shock, like, who are we? What have we just become? And I knew that my parents were so hurt and so embarrassed, ashamed of how their home and their family was being portrayed, that I said, I'm going to do everything I can do to never shame them, to be who can make them happy. And it wasn't that I wanted to be better than my brothers or anything like that, because I held my brothers to highest regard. And I don't talk about my sister in that way, just because I never knew her in that religion. Okay. She just,
Sounds like you didn't know her that much, period. You weren't really in
right.
the same
I mean,
home even much.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, she was, to me, my sister was a worldly person. And that's just what I knew. So I think at 12, I made the decision that I was going to get baptized. And I did the hard things, and I started figuring out how to get over my fear of talking at the front door. And I started doing it, and I started doing everything that needed to be done. And when the next district convention came about, sometime between the age of 12 and 13, I was baptized. And it was an easy, I mean, it wasn't like, because I was a good kid, they were like, I went through it, the study and everything I was doing everything the right way, type of things. And I just, yeah, and it was a happy day. I mean, my aunt and uncle who lived far away, they came to watch the baptism. I mean, for the first time, it was like something great happened, because you never got any attention, you never had birthdays or anything, like I don't remember one birthday except one. I remember the day I turned 10, and to me that was big because it was 2 digits, 10. And I came home and I said to my mom, I'm like, hey, I'm 10. And she goes, yep, you are. And that was it. And I remember that day. And, so it was like, this was a big event that somebody came to see me and make that decision to get baptized.
It's the only time you get to feel special.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing I will say about that event that I found very triggering, was that where the women had to get dressed and ready for the, into our suits and stuff like that. I mean, we were like put into a room, and I like all these women, I think I was the youngest, and all these adult women are all just getting naked in front of me.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that was, I actually stood there for a while, not knowing if I could do this. And I waited until the majority had kind of moved on, and then I got ready as fast as I could. And then when I went back, I put my clothes on over my wetsuit because I wasn't doing it. I was flabbergasted by
They
that.
don't prepare you for that at all. You go from
No.
modest organization where you can't even go get baptized without wearing quite a bit. I mean,
Hmm.
to some degree. Uh, I agree, Jody, and I remember walking into Freedom Hall's changing room where I got baptized, and it was just all these naked dudes, and I was like
Yeah.
a kid, and I was like, "What is this?" Nobody told me this was part of it. No, nobody.
Right.
It was very, very strange, and I just happened to find like a shower or something in the back that had a curtain, and I went back there and changed really quick, and it was shocking coming from a place where you've never been around anything like that to just be thrown in. Also, you can understand why abuse happens and stuff. It's just weird. It's
Yeah.
weird. It's just not what you it's crazy that they don't even tell you anything about this. You just walk in and it's just immediate shock, like,
Yeah.
"Where am I? This has
Right.
never happened at any Kingdom Hall before." Not the
No,
ones I've
no,
been to anyway.
no.
I don't know what happens in all the Kingdom Halls, but, just crazy. Yeah, it's shocking.
Yeah, yeah. It was a very, very, very uncomfortable for me. But I mean, anyways, I moved on from it. I was baptized, and it was great. Again, I'm at the Kingdom Hall, 12, 13 years old, the favored kid. And um and I just did whatever, like I said, I did whatever I could to just make my parents happy. And as I remember, even moving, knowing the fact I was like, okay, now what's the next step? What can I do now to move up, the role? And I came to my dad with this idea, and because I'm like, I'm not going to college because we know I'm not allowed to go to college, and that's never going to happen. So I'm like, when I'm 16, I would like to drop out of school and join the full-time ministry. So that's what I want to do. And I'm probably telling my dad this when I'm like 14 and a half or something. And he's just like, he's like, probably thinking by the time that comes around, it, won't do that. But I share that only to share that for those who don't know, that's really the mentality sometimes of especially girls, but also boys, that what does graduation, what does it matter? If we're not moving forward, it doesn't matter. So let's go. What if I just go until I legally am allowed to leave, and then I'll become a regular pioneer? I mean, there you go.
The only thing that really matters, right?
Exactly. So, anyways, that did not happen, but that just shows where I was, of what I was thinking. This is what I would like to do. And, so, I auxiliary pioneered in the summers whenever I had the possibility. My mom was always auxiliary pioneering and things like that. I was just always looking for ways that I could do more. I did take a part on a major assembly. At one point, I had it was a scenario scene with a family for about 15 minutes long, whatever, and I played a daughter who, and that was like, so exciting to me, because like I said, I actually liked doing talks and, performing, and I loved that. And it was such a great thing. And so I did that. And so then I was also seen as, oh, here she is, she's moving forward. And I started to do my own studying on my own, and just looking at my different things. And I remember one time I was reading the story of Jesus as a little kid, and the thought came to me, like, when he was little, like, was he always perfect? Or did he know better than to touch a hot stove? Or did he was he disobedient? Did his parents have to correct him? Or was he always perfect? And I was really curious about that. If if he had to be instructed on how to get to become Jesus Christ, the Holy One, and so I wrote a letter. I didn't tell my parents I did this. I wrote a letter to Brooklyn, to whoever, the brothers at Brooklyn, governing body. I have no idea who it went to. And I wrote a letter asking that question: was Jesus, perfect when he was a kid? Or was he just, was he like me? And because as far as I knew, it had never been asked or talked about in any of our publications. And because I actually did go and try to read through a lot, whenever I could find a spot about him, and didn't have that answer. And one day I got my letter back, and as you could imagine, they don't know. So it was just a bunch of BS written in there. But apparently it went over my head that what they were actually saying to me was, you shouldn't be questioning this. And I didn't really get that from what it was, but I was so proud of the fact that Brooklyn had written to me. I was so excited that Sunday or Thursday, I didn't even show it to my parents. Like, the first one I wanted to show it to was an elder at the congregation that I dearly loved. And so I took it to him and I'm like, look at what I did. I wrote to Brooklyn. I asked. And he read that and he handed it back to me and he says, this is treading on apostasy.
Wow. Yeah,
And
because you, how
and,
dare you think, Jodi?
and I was shook.
Yeah, that's crushing.
I was sitting behind him in the Kingdom Hall and I took it back and I was shaking because I'm like, I'm in trouble. I mean, and I took that letter home and I burned it. I never told my parents what I had done, what I had written, or anything. And so I don't even have that letter to be able to say, to remember what it was. But sometime around 15 years old, I wrote in, and that was my response back. And I didn't want, I was actually a little nervous that possibly he was going to go talk to other elders, talk to my parents and stuff. And I'm like, why am I getting in trouble for pure curiosity? But I just thought if anybody, and I think that I had asked my mom and dad, if they knew, and they didn't know. So I thought, well, then I'm just going to send a letter because that would be fun.
Spiritual leaders.
Right, exactly. And instead I was, crushed down to say, nope.
Well, and I mean, that's what it is to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Whenever there's a part of you as an individual that pops up and shows out above the fray, so to speak, that part must be crushed. We cannot have that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I read certain things that Jesus said, or the way it was said in the Bibles, particularly the way a young Jesus would address his mom. And I was like, man, if I had said that to my mom, if I had spoken to her that abruptly and such, ooh, that would not have gone well.
No.
But you're not like I had these thoughts and there were things that I wondered about, but I knew it was not safe to ask.
Yeah. Apparently I found out it was not safe
you were
to
just a
ask.
precocious child, just wondering a thing, sending it off, and
yep.
wow,
So
I can't believe you got treated so badly for that.
Wow. I was never going to ask anything again. That's for sure.
That's what you learn, right? That's what they're
right.
teaching you. Don't ask questions.
Yeah. And so as I went through school and stuff like that, I mean, I was now I'm in high school and things are different for me just because I'm a witness. I'm not being able to go to the events that the school does and everything. And I get it and it's fine. For the most part, I didn't, all of my teachers were always understanding. I never had any issues with teachers and stuff like that. So aside from feeling left out of things that I wished I could have been part of, but understood why I couldn't be part of them, I never felt like I was having any persecution type of thing, except until one day I was in a class with, and this is probably 11th grade, and one of the teachers, he was just, I cannot remember exactly what he was discussing, but in some way we got either on the topic of religion or we got on the topic of being bothered. And you'll get what I mean in a minute. And he was like, and it's just like when those Jehovah's Witnesses come to your door and, you got to open the door and they're like, read my pamphlet. And that's what he does. And he says, and all I want to do is take that pamphlet and smack him up in the face. And I'm sitting there with all my peers who I have gone to school with since I was in kindergarten, who know. And some giggled and some didn't, but I was embarrassed, and ashamed isn't the right word. I was mad. And just embarrassed. It's like, you don't make fun of anybody else. Why did you do that? And anyways, he was tried to be the cool teacher. So he always, when the bell rang, he would always want to, say goodbye to everybody in a certain way. And I had a good relationship with him. And it was not very long till the bell rang. He, I stood up to leave, and I just started packing my things, and I just wanted to get out, because all I wanted to do was go to my locker and put my head in it and cry. And and he came, and he like to say goodbye to me, and as we're all passing him, and I had no choice but to pass him, and I did something that I probably now would be so in trouble with. He's called me by my last name, and and he said goodbye, and I looked at him with just this look of disgust, and I punched him. and I punched him in the arm. I mean, I wasn't, but I was angry, and he knew. And he's like, what? And he's like, what? Like that. And I just walked out and headed right to my locker. And apparently some of the girls who knew me went to him and said, you moron, she's a Jehovah's Witness, and you just embarrassed her. And he came flying out of that room, came to me, and he tried to apologize, because I'm sure he was actually probably worried he could be in trouble for making fun of a religion. I don't know, but it was so upsetting to me. It was so upsetting. I mean, you don't even know what we have to go through to go there every day. Do you think we want to do this? And we're just doing what God says we're supposed to do, and you're picking on us. Nobody else is doing it. We're doing what we're supposed to do, and you're picking on me, and you make fun of me in front of my friends, in front of peers, and some people who don't even like me now have another thing to hate me for, whatever. So anyways, that was my persecution that I received, and which wasn't bad, wasn't terrible, but it was humiliating.
Yeah, I'm sure it was humiliating, and the fact that you're right, maybe he was worried about getting in trouble in some way, but it sounded like he genuinely kind of liked the kids that he taught and stuff. He probably was
Yes.
just like, "Oh, wow, I guess I put my foot in my mouth, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry it hurt you in some way."
Yeah.
I mean,
And
it's
I
more
get
of an apology than you'd ever get from Jehovah's Witnesses about
right.
anything.
And I think to me that was the one. It was like a defining moment in the thought that, yeah, these people really don't like this religion.
Yeah.
Like, it was that. It was like I thought I was likable, but they don't like what we do or who we are. And so that was a
Well, and you don't either, right?
right.
Like, I don't you didn't wanna be doing it either. Yeah.
So when I reached the point, I turned. So here I am. I'm 17, and I'm heading into my senior year, and we made this decision that what I was going to do, and one of the elders from the congregation helped with this. Was I went to our guidance counselor, and to get permission to basically do like a 2/3 or 3/4 day, take all of my day, jam it in, so that in the afternoon I would be able to go out in field ministry, because I felt like the only thing next for me to do was to become a pioneer, a regular pioneer. And I was like, why not do this? I cared about school, but I didn't really care. My dad wasn't going to let me drop out. But I was going, but maybe I could do this. And then I'm hanging out with people that I enjoy. And, I have friends, because otherwise I don't have friends, that I don't have anybody to go after school and do anything with. So I might as well go in the field ministry. And why not make my parents really proud of saying, I'm willing to bust my butt this hard, do school, and become a regular pioneer, so that they don't have to worry about me. I'm okay. And so I went through everything. The guidance counselor said, okay, they would work that out with my schedule. He wasn't really okay with it, because I was in most honors classes and everything. And it meant I was going to be leaving a lot of those really good things behind. But, that wasn't his choice. And so I went through everything to become a regular pioneer, and it did happen that, yes, starting in September, I was going to become a regular pioneer. And then this crazy thing happened. I had in the summer a full-time babysitting job, and I was it was a way to help me buy a car so that I could be a regular pioneer and everything. So I was babysitting for these two kids every day. And this one day, I see a car pull up into their driveway, and I look out, and I don't know who it is. The kids are older, a little older, like 8, something like that, 8, 10. And so I said, who's here? And they said, they looked out and they said, oh, that's Chad. And I said, okay, who's Chad? And I said, what's he doing here? That's what I said. I said, what's he doing here? And they said, he's bringing in the paper. And so I thought he was the paper boy. So he comes to the door, and I open the door and to get the paper, and he asks if the parents are there. And I said, no. And then I said, but she'll be home in probably like 10 minutes. And he's like, oh, okay. And he just kind of stayed and hung out, and come to find out, when I said, what's he doing here? He had literally just picked the paper up off the floor and was bringing it in. So the kids took the literal, when I said, what is he doing here? That he's literally walking the newspaper that was thrown on the driveway in. And so, anyways, 10, 15 minutes later, the parent came home, and she says, why is Chad here? And I said, he brought the paper, which sounds so dumb, but I was so naive and innocent. And anyways, he was just somebody that they worked with in business, and little did I know, he thought I was cute, and so he was kind of hanging out. And came time for her to take me home, and he was like, oh, well, I'm leaving, I can drive her home. I lived a mile away. And so he did. I agreed. I'm like, that's fine, it saves her the trip. So he drives me home, drops me off at the end of the driveway, because I did not want my parents to see a boy dropping me off. And I went and I babysat, like, again, 2 days later, he shows up again, and he's like, oh, they're not home. I'm like, no. But the kids seemed comfortable with him, and I'm like, well, he was willing to play video games with the little boy, whatever. And that he was somebody who thought I was pretty. And he just was visiting. Anyways, this was the start of me actually having a relationship with somebody that I probably shouldn't have a relationship with because he wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. Over time, while I was babysitting and at different times, I would see him. He would come over, hang out with the kids. The parents seemed okay with him. And slowly we developed this relationship, just over the course of I say slowly, but, we met in the middle of August. In September is when I started my high school year, my senior year. And I wasn't doing the all-day babysitting anymore. And now I'm a regular pioneer. And so, but we kept on talking, and we started building a relationship, and a friendship, but a relationship. And I was like, and so now we were no longer able to just meet at where I was babysitting. We started, I started, like, when I would get out of school, I would drive to where he worked. I would say hi. Sometimes I'd bring him lunch. We'd visit a little bit, and then I'd head out into the field ministry. And we did this for quite a bit. And then it really seemed like our relationship was serious. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I really like this person. And he's very genuine. He wasn't somebody who was trying to take advantage of me, anything. And we started to sneak out at night. So my parents would go to bed 10:30, and I would exit the window, and he'd pick me up, and we would go to a few different places, and we would sit and we would talk, and we dated in that way. And it then I would come home at about 4 a.m, and then I would get up at 6 for school and start my day all over again. And we were doing this very constantly and consistently, and I'm living off of 2-3 hours of sleep a night, which isn't terribly hard for a teenager to do sometimes, but life got a little hard, and it got a little difficult. And then one night I came in, and I had this little dog who slept in my room, and as I'm coming up to my window, I can hear her barking, and I'm like, "Oh, you need to shut up! You might draw some attention." And so I came in, got in, I told her it was okay, and probably a minute and a half after I'd gotten into the room, my mom opened the door because she heard the dog barking, and she looked at me, and I just said, I think she was hearing deer out in the backyard. I don't know. I have no idea how long that dog had been barking, but my mom also looked at me like, you are full of it. You're lying to me. I have no idea what you just did, but I know you did something. And it scared me that my mom had found out. So we went probably about 5 days without doing anything, because I'm like, I want her to come and visit my room and know I'm in my bed and everything. And so I was like, after a while, I told Chad, I said, okay, we're okay. We're fine. We can do this again. And it also allowed me to catch up on some much needed sleep. And so we went out that night. It was fine. I said, I don't want to stay out late. Got home, it was fine. The next night, same thing. I don't want to be out real late. And we drove home, and probably like maybe 1:32, something like that, which was early for us. And I had two ways that I could go in the house. I'd either go in through my bedroom window, or I would actually sneak through the house. My parents' room was at the very end of the ranch, And this night I went in through the house, and as I opened the garage door, my dad shined a light in my eye and said, "Welcome home. We've been waiting for you." And I knew I was in big trouble. Big trouble. And but I was never going to tell him what I was doing, ever. I was just like, I don't know, I will lie my pants off, but I'm never telling you what I was just doing. And my dad had this great, I say that sarcastically, that whenever he wanted to talk about you being in trouble, he did it at the dinner table, which made dinner really awful sometimes.
He did it with like other people there at
Yep.
the dinner table?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
public shaming.
Yeah. So he didn't say anything until we sat down to eat, and there was a meeting that night. And he said, "So are you going to tell me what you did and or what happened?" And I had all day at school to come up with a divine story of what I had done. And he said, "That wasn't true. I know it's not true," and this and that. And that night we went to the Kingdom Hall, and I watched my dad go with two elders into the back room and to go tell on me. And I was like, oh shit. And so when they came out, I was like, I'm going to head this off. And I went to one of the elders and I said, "Can I talk to you tomorrow?" And he said, "Yep." And so I went, and he came and he picked me up after I got out of school, and took me someplace. I realized later it was a very wrong thing for him to do, and I would never want anybody to do that with my daughter, but he took me someplace and we sat in a parked car, and we talked about it.
One-on-one?
One-on-one. And I told him my made-up story. I would never tell him it was with a boy, but I told him my made-up story of what I did and everything. And the bottom line was, unless I confessed to something, they really didn't have anybody to corroborate it. Collaborate it. There's no second witness. There's only that my mom and dad saw, what they think they saw,
You mean late night witnessing at the gas stations?
Yes. Yeah. All they know is that they saw a car go up the road, and then a couple minutes later, I walked up the driveway. That's what they saw. And so, anyways, but it was enough to scare me, and I knew I had to do something, and I didn't know what to do. I had to either break off my relationship with Chad, so that I could continue to be a good Jehovah's Witness, or we had to do something else. And I'll share this with you. I share this because my children are going to listen to this, and I share this because this is Chad's story also. At this moment, and at the moment I got married, I was a virgin. While we walked away and we were out every night, and we were spending all this time one-on-one, I was remaining true to what I felt was right within the religion. And Chad was honoring of me, and what he also felt was right. And I just don't ever want, and I know that there's also maybe some Jehovah's Witnesses listening to this that just I wasn't doing bad, immoral things. that was the only way we could date. That's my point. It's the only way we could just get to know each other. We couldn't do it during the day. We had to do this under the cover of night. So anyways, when we had to make a decision of what to do, and it was a very hard decision. I didn't know. And so we sat together one day, not in the night, because we never snuck out again. And I just said, I don't know what to do, but I can't do this anymore. And he said to me, well, we could leave. He said, if you want to be with me and have a relationship, we could leave. And he says, my dad lives in California and we could go there. And we were on the East Coast, just about the farthest away you could get to Southern California. And I don't, the good girl that I was, the peacekeeper, the one who always did everything right. I don't know why I agreed, because it went against everything that I was ever taught to do. But in that moment, I felt like something inside me said, run.
If you want to tell your story on the podcast, buy merch, or get more information, go to shunnedpodcast.com. Probably because if being a good girl just means doing whatever anyone else tells you to do and people pleasing and not being true to who you are and what you want to do, even though those things aren't inherently bad, and if major pressure is being applied to you to keep you in a tiny little box that has been made up by some individuals, then yes, you may feel the need to, just like many of your older siblings in some way, to act out, to break outside of that box. As humans, we don't like to be controlled at that level. And you, absent a healthy way of expressing this relationship with healthy people around you who can help you to do it in a healthy way, yeah, you're gonna go do what you need to do.
Yeah.
The control, the extreme control and repression is what often creates that acting out, lack of control, and sometimes hyperactivity in certain ways.
Absolutely. I felt like it left me with no choice.
Yeah, what else
And
you gonna do?
right. And so I was like, even though California and that whole idea of doing that was crazy, I said,
What any
okay.
crazier than the environment you're being raised in?
Yeah. And I believed. I'm like, okay, if I could just get him away, we'll go out there, we'll find a Kingdom Hall, and I will turn him into a good little Jehovah's Witness boy. And then we'll get married, and then I'll go home. And then everybody will be like, okay, yeah, we love him. You're right. He was a great guy. And so that was that was my thought.
Sure.
And so one night, it was a Sunday night. It was actually going to be a week, Thanksgiving week, ironically. And so I had that whole week off of school, and I packed everything that I could into a garbage bag that was needed, mostly clothes, a couple mementos, whatever. My parents went to bed. I said unique goodbyes to everybody that was important in my life. My couple of my brothers that I was able to see, my parents, nieces, and I put everything in my bag, and had a certain time that he said he'd be near the end of my driveway, and I left. And I was 17. I was 17. So and this was Thanksgiving, so this was November. And we got in his car, and the next morning he was willing to leave, but he had some goodbyes he needed to say, which one of them was to his grandfather, who was in a nursing home. So we went and saw him, and he had goodbyes he had to say too, and we left, and we between the two of us, we had so little money, but one of my brothers,
how old was he?
he was 20.
Okay.
He had a job, he was working, but it wasn't like we saved up to make this plan to go. We were just like,
He was being forced by the circumstances at home.
yes. And so my brother Dave came up to the house the day before, and he came into my room, was hanging out with me for a few minutes, and he gave me some money, and he's like, this just to help you out. He says, I know you don't get to work as much, and you got to pay for gas and stuff like that. And he had no idea that I'm like, oh, I needed this really bad. And so we left. We drove cross country. We slept at gas stations. We went all the way across, and I was enjoying my freedom, but every day I was sitting there thinking about what my parents were doing at that time. What was okay tonight's the Kingdom Hall. Are they telling people what's happening? They must be scared. They don't know where I am. We don't have cell phones, yet. We don't have that stuff. And we made it to his father's. Actually, we got into San Diego, and we ran out of gas about 10 miles from being there, and we had $3 gas. $3, and a tow truck driver pulled up, and he's like, my Chad was said, we just ran out of gas, and we said we got $3, and he gave us like $3 worth of gas, and we like coasted in on fumes the rest of the way, and arrived in on Thanksgiving, and we started our little life there. And Chad called a couple people, those who I babysat, just to say, hey, we've made it, just so you know. And meanwhile, my mom has been calling those people to say, do you know where Jodi is? I wrote her a letter, and my letter basically said, if I don't leave, then I'm going to leave this religion. I have to leave so I don't get lost. And
if I don't leave, and I have to leave this religion, I have to leave so I don't get lost.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? If I don't leave, I'm gonna get lost. I'm gonna get in trouble. Right.
You're gonna lose me. I'm going to be gone. If I stay here, I'm gonna continually get into trouble. But if I go, my plan and my effort was to go and to try to do this myself, with maybe at a Kingdom Hall where nobody knows me, and we can just kind of work again, allow
but
it
even
to
just
happen.
the act of you running away with this guy, that would have gotten you disfellowship.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So it's funny the way we have to, but you're having to reason through things in somewhat unreasonable ways, because the rules and all of it are very arbitrary and capricious, and it's not a healthy place anyway.
Right.
But yeah, you were doing what you had to do, but you kind of saw it almost as though you were saving them in some way, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. I was trying to, I'm like, if I stay, I'm going to hurt you worse.
Yeah.
That was the big thing. If I stay, I'm going to hurt you worse. So I'm going to go, and I'm going to try to do this.
Which is really, if I stay, you're going to end up hurting me worse.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And so I left. My dad I believe my dad had become like, every time something happened with one of my brothers, he was taken down from this and that. And my one, my brother, who's 4 years older than me, my dad allowed him to get married in our home, to have a civil, and so when that happened, my dad lost his privileges again. And so I think when that happened, he came back as a ministerial servant. And so I believe that when I left, they took him away. He was not a ministerial servant again. And then after that, my dad said, I have no desire to serve. He didn't want to try again. So I caused him to lose the ministerial servant privileges. And I
Well, the religion
realized
caused him to.
exactly, and that was what I was about to say. The circumstances behind it made the religion say, you have failed because of your daughter's actions, so you are out again.
Again, that's just the way of controlling him to control you, right? All of
Exactly.
this holding this over his head is just so he'll keep his family in line so that the organization can continue to grow. It's just this machine that's controlling everybody. So, yeah, they always blame the victims of it.
Right. 100%. 100%. Not paying it, not understanding that this really doesn't have everything to do with me, but this is about you and them and the control they have. And so,
Well, at the end of the day, which would you rather be in the end? Would you rather be an elder or a ministerial servant or just a father?
yeah, yeah, right. So, anyways, we went out there, and one of the times within the first week that we were there, and we had made contact with home to like somebody from home, or Chad had made contact with them. My mom had called them again and said, have you heard anything from Jodi? And she was so heartbroken that they gave her our phone number. So then she called, and now they have a connection of where I am. Yes, I'm in California, and everything, and just trying to let them understand I'm okay. And it was just very awkward. The letters, I mean, then we started getting the letters that from her to please come home, the begging and things, which I understand. I would do it if it was me.
Sure.
And so that was all happening. And once we kind of got settled at his father's house, we started, I found the Kingdom Home, and I was like, okay, will you go with me? We'll go once. And I think we went on a Thursday night. And so he said, sure, I'll go. And we went, and I tried to play it cool, I guess. And a sister came up and said, hello, are you new? And I said who I was. Said I didn't. I don't really remember what I said, but I'm pretty sure I said I've just recently moved here, from where I was at. And so she was like, oh, okay, whatever. And I don't remember anybody else coming up and talking to us, but we came in a little later, and then we left right away. I didn't really feel like getting into any long conversations. And then, so that was Thursday. And then on Saturday, Chad and I were at his father's house, and meanwhile, we immediately started looking for jobs to start supporting ourselves and everything. And his father came to me in my room and said, "There's somebody here to see you." And I said, "Okay." I thought that was weird, and we walked out, and there was two brothers at the door. And I was like, "Okay, so they know." And the elders in my congregation contacted who they would have assumed would be the congregation out there, and they sent the elders. And so we sat and we had kind of a formal, informal, just a little conversation. "Great to see you. Well, maybe we'll be back at the Kingdom Hall again," type of thing. I mean, they at least, I think they were doing like a checkup to see what type of a living situation was she in. And physically, I was in a safe home, a nice home. I wasn't in a druggy home or anything immoral, but I'm there living with two guys. And so we did not attend, and we did not go back to the Kingdom Hall again, because they came again a couple times, whatever. It wasn't too long after that we moved from where his father was, and we ended up we had an apartment. We had a wedding date set, and they found out where we were living now, and they were constantly coming. Sometimes I did not answer the door. I never answered the door if I was alone. I wanted
Isn't
Chad
that
to be there.
so creepy?
Yeah, it was very creepy.
Isn't it creepy that the tentacles, the fingers of the organization can reach across the country to stalk you, to find you, to start showing up where you live, as though they have any right or entitlement to that? Isn't that so creepy?
Yeah. Yes, it was. It
Very
was.
weird.
Um,
Normal people don't do that.
Normal people don't do that. You're right. And at least send women, but at least
Oh
send
yeah,
somebody.
yeah,
At
but the
least send
women can't. They don't have a role to judge you like the men
but
do.
right, exactly. Send somebody for a checkup
Under
call on me,
authority.
but don't, but like these elders, they were coming a lot. I would hear from a neighbor, "Yeah, two guys came to your door while you were at work," and I'm like, oh great. And so the last time I ever saw them, actually I didn't see them. They found out what our work schedules were, and they found out when Chad would be leaving. And where we lived was adjacent to, our apartment complex was adjacent to a mall, and we both had jobs in the mall. And we would walk there every day. And so Chad, his job was, he went in first that day, and I don't actually even know if I was working that day. I don't know, but I was home. And as he's crossing the street, he looks, and in the turn lane is who he believes are those two elders. And so he finished crossing the street, and he turned back and he watched them turn. And then they turned and were going up, and they were going to U-turn into our apartment complex. And so he bolted back across the street, and he ran past our apartment, and he ran to them at their car. And before they could even make their way to the apartment, he told them, "You are no longer welcome or allowed there." And they were like, "Well, that should be Jodi's choice." And he said, "It is." And he says, "But that is my home also, and you are not welcome to come back there again. If we need you, if she needs you, she can contact you. And then he says, and I won't stop her, but you are not welcome at our door anymore. And they even had gone so far as to find out where I worked. And then one day they came in and I saw them coming, and the girl who I was working with, I said, those people want to talk to me and I do not want to talk to them. I'm going in the back room. Would you please tell them I am not here? And I think that happened first. And then, because once Chad had said that, they never came back again. So yeah, that all happened.
That's pretty harrowing. I mean, really, again, what this is stalking, to try to find out everywhere that you go, to watch your habits, to sit there and to try to catch you when Chad's not around, and different things. This is not what normal humans, or even most religions, do. This is so abnormal to do that. It's like, who do you think you are? Are you like mobbed up or something? What is this? This is not normal. It's,
right.
as I mentioned at times, I in my cult recovery coaching practice, I work with people. I mean, there's times where I'm meeting with people and they're in their car in a park somewhere in the dark, and we're having this conversation, trying to help them figure out their next steps, or how to at least deal with their situation in a healthier way, because their husband's at home and they're an elder, or
Yeah.
there's people paying through third parties, so the money can't be traced because it can't be found out. Like, these aren't you should never have to. The reason all of these things end up being so hidden, and then sweet people like yourself feel bad for having like run away or something like that, is because they set up these untenable situations where you have no choice but to respond in these ways. It's so damaging and unhealthy. And I know people, they've trapped their cars at work with, like, they're like, who are like hitmen, like pulling up behind their cars at work, like boxing them in so they can hand them a subpoena to a judicial committee. Like,
Yeah.
you're nobody. What are you doing?
Right. Yep.
That's
Absolutely.
crazy.
Absolutely.
You
So
should never have been subjected to that. I'm sorry that you and Chad had to be subjected to that.
yeah, he's a saint. He was a saint through all this. Because I never really thought about everything that he was going to have to do and go through.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting there having this plan of, I'm going to just take this kid, across country, and I'll turn him into a good little Jehovah's Witness boy. We'll all be fine, and Chad was raised Lutheran. He came from he lived across the street from his church. He loved he loved going to church and stuff like that. And this was like completely off his radar. He had really no idea what he was about to get involved in. He had no idea these people were going to come after me, and he did not know what to do. But he was a good guy who said, I promised to take care of her when I brought her here. And what am I going to do? So Chad went to, one day he went to a Christian bookstore and somehow got in contact with a church out there. And he met with somebody who was a young pastor. And he told him, he's like, this is what's going on with her. I have no idea what to do. And he gave him the phone number of somebody, and I believe this is the way it happened anyways, who was part of a counter cult ministry. And little did we know that going to San Diego was one of the places where there's a pretty strong counter cult ministry. A lot of it specifically with Jehovah's Witnesses, at least at that time. And so these two people started meeting with Chad. And he's like, they're like, boy, you just opened Pandora's box, bringing that girl over here, and let's see what we can do, how we can help you and help her. So then they're telling him, one of the leaders of this specific group, this specific counter cult ministry, was an ex-circuit overseer, who had left the religion and was shunned and everything, but had found out, that it was not the truth. And they also, they were all of them were also Christians who believed that there was validity to the Bible, but not the Bible that the Jehovah's Witnesses were teaching, and not the God that Jehovah's Witnesses were teaching. And so they were like, they told him, we're going to have to help her. We're going to have to do this very carefully. And she might not agree with us to do this, but let's see if she will meet, because he's an apostate. The two that were originally met with him were not apostates. They were just
But there's
guys who
false religion, right? So
right, exactly. But they were ones who had studied this religion like to a T, and shredded it apart and found out everything. And he asked me if I would told me about him, told me how he just happened to meet these people and everything, and asked me if I would go. And everything inside me that was a Jehovah's Witness was screaming, don't you dare. These are the apostates. This is what you have been warned about your whole life. You are not supposed to do this. But I loved him. And he was asking me if I would be willing to just listen. And I would do anything for him. I went across country with him, and I left everything to be with him. So why would I not do this one little thing? And I'm just like, I'm trained. I know this religion like the back of my hand. I'm good. I can whatever. So we went, and we had meetings over the course of, we had several meetings. I would really give my focus to the two people who were never Jehovah's Witnesses, but I did not like talking to the apostate. I did not want to. I probably was rude to him in a lot of ways, because I'm just like, I'm not supposed to. You are. These guys don't know better, but you know better, and you're trying to trick me. And so I would go with my Bible, and we would go back and forth several times, over stuff, and we made no headway. The only headway they ever made was that I was willing to come back another time. And part of the reason was because one of them had this woman, and they were engaged to this woman named Georgia, who was the sweetest, kindest person. And she was willing to sit in, and she was like this, she was soothing. I mean, when these three guys wanted to come at me with their claws out, she would defend and step in and say, back down, because she could, knew that, you're going to lose her. You're pushing too hard. She's not going to listen. If we want her to see that this is a cult, we have to do this softly. And so I even one time agreed to go to a meeting of ex-JWs Witnesses someplace, and some people tried to come and talk to me, and so when did you leave? When did you get out? And I said, I am not out. I am a Jehovah's Witness. And they're like, oh, okay. And I was still so steadfast in what I was doing and stuff. And
Well, yeah,
um,
you weren't going into any of these meetings with your heart open. Your mind wasn't open necessarily. You were just there to defend the thing, right?
right,
So
exactly. I wasn't looking for an answer.
you had the truth. You weren't looking for any truth. So
Exactly.
this is why you can't just shake people awake. It doesn't necessarily work like that.
Exactly. Exactly. And I have a lot of people who have come to me and said, so tell me what I need to say to my Jehovah's Witness family or and I'm like, I can't tell you. I said, because what worked for me is not going to work for them.
Sure.
But so anyways, one night we were going back and forth over arguing about things. And we got onto the subject of Jesus and the teaching of the Jehovah's Witnesses have about Jesus being God's first creation. That that Jesus was God's first creation, the first thing that he ever made, which is why they believe, speak against the Trinity belief, is because if Jesus was equal to God, then to Jehovah or however you want to say it, that he couldn't have made him if they were equal. But anyways, that is one of the teachings that the Jehovah's Witness taught, was that Jesus was God's first creation.
Yeah.
And we went
Was
back and
God's
forth over
son, a separate entity.
exactly. And so they said to me, I went back and forth, and they finally said, just show us in the Bible. And so I said, well, I will. And I sat there with my Bible and I opened it up and I'm like, here I am in Genesis. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not here. And I'm going through, and then I go into all of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And okay, it's not here. And then I'm back in my concordance and I'm looking back here for where, and I'm like, and I'm in Revelation and I'm everywhere. I am physically feeling sick, and I'm like, I cannot defend the one teaching that I have told everybody while I'm out in service, and it's being taught. They're like, this is happening. I'm thinking, it's not here. Where is this? And they all softened down, and they were like, they've lied to you, Jodi. They've continually lied to you. It's not there. And so many of their other things that they've taught are lies. And I just sat there and I held my Bible. I couldn't even look at anybody, but the best way to describe what happened in that moment was as if had been living my entire life in a box that had been painted black inside, completely black, but the sun is shining in every direction all around it, but it can't get through. No light gets through. And then all of a sudden, somebody took a needle and they just pricked it. And then from that moment on, you could not hide that there was light and that you had been living in complete dark. At that moment, I was like, if they had lied about this, what else have they lied about?
You got new light.
And it got new light, but not the kind that they would like. And I was just shocked and done. Actually, at that point, Georgia said to everybody in that room, we are done here and we're stopping. And I never spoke a word. I walked out. Chad walked out. We went home. I never talked. And why we got to his father's house. And here, this is probably January, end of it's even in California, it's cold. It was cool. And I went, and he had a pool in his backyard. And I went in and I sat out there and I put my feet in the deep end. And I'm still just like sitting there visually thinking about that I'm looking at my Bible like, this is a lie. They did this, they've lied. And if they've lied about this, what else have they lied about? And if I've been teaching a lie to everybody, and is my family in a lie? All of my family that I love, are they all in a lie? And some people would think, we're so excited. She must have been so excited to have the light finally and to understand. No, I sat and I thought about whether I just wanted to fall into the pool and drown. Because I had everything was a lie to me.
Well, this is why Georgia stopped the meeting, and this is also why trying to wake up people in this way is not necessarily always healthy, because it's not being done in a way where you were wanting to see anything. It's beating you down and wearing you down until you do eventually break on something, and it leaves you in a very negative state, because you weren't looking for anything different. You were kind of forced into it.
I would agree with that to an extent.
It can be harmful. I mean, I'm glad
Sure.
ultimately that you saw that light, but you better have some follow-up and some aftercare for somebody
Absolutely.
in that situation.
And the good thing was that those people did.
Good.
And especially Georgia. And I think that that's why she was there. She was
Sounds
part
like
of
it.
she was part of that aftercare, because and Chad and I have talked about this, and he understands my feelings that to a degree I felt like with them that I was a number, but Georgia was the one who said she's a human.
Yeah, with
And
feelings that you have to take
with
into
feelings.
account through all of
And
this.
now it's the where do we go from there? Because if we leave, if it was just a cut off and a done and wash our hands, well, we showed her, and now she's got to go deal with her family, and she can go tell all of them, her thing. Then, I might as well fall in the swimming pool and drown. But
Well, and it
but
is hard. It's hard no matter how you find this out, right? It's a
right.
shattering of an identity. It's a shattering of a faith, a belief system in many ways. It's a shattering of who you were. It's yeah, I totally understand. I think there's a lot of people that would echo that that sentiment as far as feeling that way. Some of us, I mean, I was excited in certain ways to learn certain things because it meant that the pressure I had been under all that time, I felt relief from it. I didn't need to feel that pressure anymore, but
Hmm.
it still was shattering to realize, again, Jehovah's Witnesses think that we're all excited about this. No, it wasn't exciting necessarily to have everything fall apart,
Right.
and to know that the rest of it was likely to fall apart too, as far as the relationships. Not
Right.
super exciting.
Yeah. And I sit there and I think about the fact that, back then, 30 plus years ago, there was not an internet where somebody could go on and say, if like, okay, I got some questions, so I'm going to go and look and read shocking things that are happening, that happen with the Australia Royal Commission, and to find out about their involvement in the UN, and see these factual things. It took people, as harsh as that was, it that's all there was sometimes. was
Sure.
just people who could try to come with some facts. And, you know, and I know your story. I know what you believe and where you're at this point. I don't know if because of the fact that I was born into it and always believed that there was somebody, a God. I believed. I sat there that day on that pool and I said, you know, I don't know who you are. You know, I am praying. I'm like, I have no idea who you are. I have no idea if you are Jehovah, if you are Jesus, if 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 you're just God. I have no idea who you are, but all I have ever cared about my whole life is serving you and having that relationship with you.
Mhm.
And that was my desire, was I was going to figure this out. I was going to figure out what the truth was. And sadly, at times, I thought my family would be excited to hear what I had found out too. Because here we are, we're in California, we're in San Diego, where and these men have studied this religion and they love all the nerdy things about this religion. And they took me to see, I've heard it said two ways, I don't know which way, but it took me to see Betsarim, whichever it is. But I went there, I saw the building. They actually gave my husband, and he's kicking himself because he says, he thinks it's still here, but we actually had we had the deed, a copy of the deed that showed where that had been deeded to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that or Abraham, Moses, and whoever. But like to see those biblical names on there, that that, like, are you nuts?
That's pretty wild.
They're gonna come back and live here and see this. And anyways, that was where everything with the Jehovah's Witnesses stopped. There wasn't much to go out and research and go out and find. It's not like it is today, where I'm like, I could just say, if you're questioning it, just type in Jehovah's Witness, and that's all you gotta do, and let it speak for itself. But
back then it was just groups like you came in that ministry, or probably just some random ex-JWs who were out there somewhere, who probably felt like they were the only ones, or maybe there were, I don't know if there was any books. There might have been a few books back then, but
there was some there.
Not much.
Kingdom of the Cults had some information in it that I read about them and things like that. There were groups, there were ex-Jehovah's Witness groups of people, but I had zero desire to go be part of them. I didn't. I didn't have any desire to go and seek them out. I just wanted to try to live my life with my husband, with Chad, and who we weren't married at that point, but we did get married. We got married in April of 91, and I think in June, all of these people, except for the circuit overseer, he wasn't at our wedding, but the rest of them were there.
Really?
They were.
Interesting.
No, I did not invite him.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I had this thing about him, and I don't know, but because of Georgia, I love Georgia, and she was just kind to me. She treated me, she was the mom I needed out there. And sadly, Georgia had cancer, and within probably a year of being out there, she passed away. And that was very hard to lose her, because she was a lot, meant a lot to both of us.
I'm so sorry.
But yeah, thank you. But I think it was June or July of that year, we made our first trek back home to our family. I didn't tell my mom and dad I was coming, and we wanted to surprise them. And Chad's family there picked us up at the airport, and
So
we
is
went.
can I, sorry to interrupt,
Sure.
but
Mhm.
I know you had kind of had the plan of I'm going to go out there, convert him essentially.
Yeah.
But ultimately, either way, get married and then come back
Sure.
somewhat, not triumphant, but in a situation where perhaps I'll be accepted
Right.
more. So were you kind of feeling, were you really nervous going back? Or did you feel like, well, maybe he's not a witness, but we are married, and so that will kind of satisfy things?
I felt like, yes, we're married. To understand we aren't living in sin. We're not doing anything. And but I can't. I was hoping that that was part of it, and I also felt like, well, I'm not under their I'm not under the control of their congregation anymore, because I live out here. I've already had elders out come from out there under my congregation or whatever. So that's who I'd be dealing with. There was some naivety in that to a degree. I didn't know, but all I knew was I really missed my mom and I wanted to go home. And I was hoping that, just like they had accepted my brothers in different ways, in different scenarios, and I was not disfellowshipped at this point, that they would accept me. And you got to meet Chad anyways. So anyways, that's what we did. Went home, surprised my mom, she cried. I surprised my dad, he cried. They were happy, they were nice to Chad. And we had dinner with them. I think we split staying with his family and my mom and dad at their houses, back and forth, and that was okay. At that point, my brother, who lived next door, who was the Jehovah's Witness, I went over to see him, and it was a little bit of a cold meeting. He was not happy to see me. He hugged me, but it was about it. He was quiet. He didn't answer. He answered questions if I asked things, but he didn't promote, try to take part in a conversation and things. And just, I don't know, it was just real cold. Just what I don't know how to describe that, but I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna head back.
Wasn't interested.
Yeah, I went back home, and to my mom and dad's literally next door, and I said, I'll see you later. And at that point, it became obvious that he really had no desire to talk to me. And I think at some point, and I don't remember when, but my mom basically said that his feelings were that even though I haven't been disfellowshipped, what I did was wrong, was worthy of being disfellowshipped, and also that I had hurt my parents so badly by leaving, which I understood. I did. I hurt my parents badly. I destroyed them. I take no happiness in what I did, because I can only imagine if one of my children did that to me, how I would feel. I get it. But my parents moved on and they forgave.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did they not only forgive, but did your parents ever apologize for creating a situation in which you felt like you needed to leave?
Right. No, of course not. No.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And and so I can't remember whether I obviously being back, they told the elders I was there, and then the elders wanted to have a meeting with me, and so I was naive about that a little bit too. But Chad was like, oh, he was going to be there, and so we had a meeting that was my mom, dad, the elders, whatever, and so it, in all honesty, it sat there and I sat there and it really became a battle between Chad, who really understood the fallacy of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and these two elders. And they went back and forth. And I remember at one time they turned to me and they asked me what I thought and what I felt. And you know, I was crying because I was like, I hear this and this sounds true, but I hear this and this sounds true. And actually, I know this. I know this. You teach that this is here and it's not. And so tell me, you know, you none of this makes sense. And they wanted to have another meeting and with just me, and I said no. We had to go. We were leaving. There wasn't time. We had other family to visit, and I did not come to be part of that. I allowed it really for the sake of my mom and dad, who wanted to try whatever. And so anyways, I just remember, you know, my mom and dad took us to the airport when it was time for us to go home. And I just remember getting on the plane and just being so glad that I was leaving with Chad and that I was out of there, that I didn't have the stress that they were putting me under, the feelings that they were being put on me. And then I was going back home to people who loved me and were willing to let me do my own study and my own time of finding out what I felt like, you know, to find out what the truth was. Because at that point, I didn't trust anything that had a religion. I didn't want to like talk to a Baptist. I didn't want to talk to a Lutheran. I didn't want to talk to, you know, a Catholic, because because I didn't want to be I didn't trust religion to not.
Yeah, also,
I just.
you keep talking about searching for you wanted to go out and do your own research about the truth, but who told you that there was one truth? That's a Jehovah's Witness thing. That there's the one true thing. There's the one true path, and that's the only way to work. Otherwise, you are wrong.
Sure. Right.
You know,
Right.
and that's, you know, that's a very, like, they even set us up for a path that can be destructive itself.
Yeah. I and I think when I talk about the truth, and because that has for you and I, that has a very negative
Sure.
connotation, and that's a hard thing. I think for
That's a
me
black and
it's
white universal truth that they talk
it
about.
exactly. It means more than what it means to the other people, but to the average person, because they want to use that to mean their belief system and how they're right and everybody else is wrong. I wanted to be able to trust something. That was where I was looking. I wanted to be able to trust who I was going to be praying to. If I'm going to be praying to somebody, I want to know who I'm praying to. And that was what I wanted to search for. And I was tired of, I just didn't want anybody controlling. And I was just so glad that I was going to be going back with Chad, and just to be me.
That's
And
it,
to,
right? To
and
be
to,
able to trust yourself to go
yeah,
figure out who you want to pray to, or
right.
whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
but trusting yourself enough to be able to do that research, to be able to search, to figure out who it is that Jodi sees evidence for, and trusting yourself to find that truth for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That was such a just a big thing for me. And it was just such an ugly weight going back home.
Yeah, because
And
they don't trust you, right? Back
right.
home, truth is given to you. You are, I mean, just like that situation that you were talking about, you in this elders meeting with your parents and your husband, and cognitive dissonance is that feeling, that uncomfortable feeling you get when you hold one thing to be true and something else comes in that also seems true and actually threatens that long held deep truth.
Yeah.
And what a hellacious place to be put for you to sit there in between the people that raised you and gave you what they said was true, the person who helped you to see that maybe it wasn't all true. And then these men who are there to reinforce what your parents taught you, but I mean, they asked you what you believed, but not in a safe place where you got to figure it out. It's in
Right.
a place that's completely fraught and that you really can't say anything that's going to go
Right.
over well.
Because if I did say that I 100% believed what Chad was saying, I
Yeah.
mean, I was, I mean, they might as well just have a disfellowshipping committee right then and there.
Well, yeah, and what
Because
if you disagreed with both sides and
yeah,
found something for yourself that you felt was true, right?
yeah,
That they put you in a situation where it's choose sides instead of who are you?
yeah, sure, right, right. And I think that that's the thing that was I was ready to go home, like and just become me.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, I don't think all of that's happened completely yet. And to an extent, I like that I'm at a place where I'm uh you know like what I said about we talked about earlier about my that being able to talk freely the way my mom talks is, I freely can say uh, um what I'm comfortable with and what I'm not comfortable with. And well, I don't know if I believe that, so I'm going to research this. And or even if I'm not going to, I can say I'm not comfortable with this. I don't believe that this is true. um and and I think that that's where I am at this point in my life, is I have reached a place where I'm me. And I was too, um and that's why I'm doing this today, is because I had reached a place where I said I want my kids to understand that even if everybody found this video right now and found what's happening, um, my life and who I am and who I've raised my kids to be is worth more than who they want, still, than for me to allow them to still have some sort of control over me. And that's why I found this quote, and I don't know if we're even gonna get to it ever, but I thought I'd read it. And
No, go for it.
let's see where I wrote it down at. Oh yeah, this one. The people who say you can't and you won't are usually the ones scared that you will. And
That's great.
that's why um that's why I'm doing this, because even 35 years later, there's a voice telling me that what I'm doing today, talking to you, isn't appropriate. And I want my children and my grandchildren to know that then I'm not scared.
Well,
So that,
right.
and that I will.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can and you should.
Yes,
You
exactly.
can and you should. If talking to me, if I hold so much power that I can influence everyone, I mean, I
Yeah.
tease about starting my own cult at times,
Yeah.
but if I have that much influence, I mean, again, like even in my coaching practice, I'm not here to tell anybody to be me. Uh,
Yeah.
you and you referenced earlier, like my belief system and such.
Hmm.
We may believe it very differently, but cool. Go believe what you believe. I would never, I want everybody to figure out who they are.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the only way you can be happy in this life is living authentically. When you're so much of the depression, the anxiety, the things we see in this world are because people are trying to be somebody they're not, oftentimes to please other people who don't really care to get to know them for who they really are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that you're coming here today, even if you have some, in fact, if you have trepidation about it because of the things you were taught, I love that even more because that's even more you having to push past something to be yourself, which is what at the end of the day, you want your kids to be who they are, you want your grandkids or whoever to be who they are, and to be able to love them for that. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You should be loved for it too.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I guess so. Uh, so that was how many years ago are we talking then? Like,
That was about, that was 1991 when I had that meeting with them. And I will say that in that amount of time when I was in California and being with, over there, the only person who ever contacted me to just say, "Are you okay? Just tell me you're okay," was Bob.
well, I'm glad that you had Bob. That's a beautiful thing for somebody to reach out to just, I mean, at the end of the day, again, this is what we want to be loved for, is for who we are by the people who see us and value us for who we are. And it sounds like Bob had some of that, huh?
Yeah. Well, he even said, I left too. I left too, Jodi. You know that I did. And he says, I just want to know you're okay. And is that guy a good guy? Is Chad a good guy? I said, yes, he's a good guy. I promise he's a good guy. I said, he doesn't. I said, I can come home if I want to. I want you to know that. And he's like, all right. So, others would contact me to say, when are you coming home? You've disappointed your family, you've this or that, whatever. And but not Bob. And that's okay. And but he understood what it was like. And he was, um, um, anyways, Chad and I got married. Just kind of fast forwarding, we had two of our children in San Diego. From there, we moved. He got a job here in Georgia, and we moved. Did this big cross country trip, and we landed in Georgia, and we which was ironic to me because the one thing I was leaving and the one thing I missed the most about San Diego was my friend Georgia. And here we are, ended
Oh,
up here.
that's cool.
And so, yes, and we have been here since the spring of 95. Jeff in Georgia, um, and got married out there. We were at her wedding, even though she was dying, and they belong to the Vineyard Church out there. And the Vineyard was a very safe place for me to land.
Good.
How they allow, it was a place where I felt like I could search out the questions of what, who or what God was. Is there a God? Any of those things. And on my own, without anybody pushing me. When we came here to Georgia, we were here for a couple of years and we found a vineyard here. And and the people there who have been wonderful, have loved me. They have treated me like family and helped me to go through some really junky places as, coming out of this cult. Because I for me, it's never been a one and done. It's like, oh, I'm out and nothing ever hurts anymore. And I don't deal
No,
with things. Yeah.
healing is a process, not an
Oh,
event.
it is so big. And it's like,
Oh,
sometimes you just don't even have any idea where something's going to come out of the blue and how big it can be and how hard it can be.
your whole life.
And yes. And, like I realized, this is sort of a random thing, but I think it's so important because of what we were sort of dealt with as kids. I had this dream as a child that all of a sudden as an adult, I remembered it. And like, it was like a triggering to me. And it was at my home, and my parents have this big field down in front of their house. And um, all of the Jehovah's Witness adults were going someplace. I don't understand but there was some event that all the Jehovah's Witness adults were supposed to go to, and there was no place for the children to go. And they had to go to this. And so they were killing us. And when I looked down in the field and I'm watching all these children dying in all these weird different ways. And I realized, I'm pretty sure as an adult, I look back and I think this was out of one of the scenes of our books that, those terrible books that we had to study and about torture and things like that. And I just remember telling my mom, I'm like, please, I can take care of myself. I promise I won't leave the house. You can go do whatever you need to do. And just don't. I promise I'll be good. I'm begging my mom just not to do. And she goes, no, it's what we're being told. It was very bothersome. And so almost like a genocide was happening, which really was happening, was what it was, of all the children that I was even in school with, or neighbors, or kids that I would see at circuit assemblies, and we're all there because the Jehovah's Witnesses are saying that that's what has to happen. And I just felt like it's almost like it, because it wasn't just Jehovah's Witness kids, but it was all the kids. And this was one of the things that came back to me as an adult, was remembering this dream so vividly, and remembering like scenes out of the books that we had, which I gave away all my books before we moved to Georgia. We get anything that we had that was, they're all gone. But anyways, it's like, because of, I believe that, I had that dream because it was something that's in my mind, continually being pushed by some of those books that children never should have seen, the illustrations of those books that we saw as kids. And
Certainly, yeah. I mean, lots of violence illustrations and such, and uh, certainly lots of fear around the Great Tribulation and kids
yes.
being rounded up and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But also, don't they genocide the kids? They take all the kids and they kill all of their aspirations. They kill everything that you ever want to be for yourself. They make you one of them. They do genocide all of their kids.
Yeah.
They try to.
Yeah.
They
For
don't
sure.
want you to be you. They want you to
Yeah.
be them.
And it destroys, and part of what I was leading up to that was just to say that, it, even if you leave the religion, it continually controls you in those aspects, of how it continually kills and eats away at you. My I've purposefully only mentioned the names of two of my brothers, and because the others, they have their own stories, and that's up to them. And but I've mentioned David and I've mentioned Bob. Those two I was honestly the closest with. David went through a time where he got very, very sick, and and the Jehovah's Witnesses came to him and said it's because, and he should have died, but he didn't. And they came to him and said, "This is your wake up call, David. You're trying to. God's trying to tell you. Jehovah's trying to tell you. You need to come back to Him." And I was so mad, but he did it. He was like, "Okay," and so he started doing all the stuff again. And Dave would come down and see me down here and stay with me and the kids and stuff like that. And I always hoped that maybe he'd be the one that I could keep a relationship with, type of thing, and don't go back and join him. But he did. And even one time he came here and he's talking to me. He's like, it's the truth, Jodi. You need to stop doing what you're doing. And I cut him off and I said, hang on there. I said, I do not believe it's the truth, David. I said, if I believed it was the truth, I would do it. I said, it goes against everything I would, who I am, to not do something that I know is right. And if I believed that was right, then I would do it. And he's like, "You don't believe it?" And I said, "No." And he's like, he was so taken back. It was like he had this little prepared sermon that he was going to give me to try to save me. And I was like, that's not going to happen. And but anyways, David again had a work accident. He was on scaffolding doing construction. He started to teeter on the scaffolding, and his hand, and he went out to reach to get to hold himself up. He put his hand into an electrical box and he shocked himself. It blew him off the scaffolding and he crushed the back of his head. He was life flighted, and 3 times on the way there, he was brought back. He died 3 times. It was very bad. He was in ICU. He was hooked up to life-saving devices and ventilators and everything to try to keep him alive. He did eventually come out of it, but David was never the same after that. And he needed help in ways that the brothers, the business he was working for belonged to a brother, and there was the mistake of having that open electrical box was on the brothers. That was his fault. So the union and the whatever, basically David had to sue for that because of that accident, because he lost the ability to work anymore. He had bad, he couldn't stand. He would, all the time lost his balance. So he couldn't physically work anymore. And he just lost his desire for just happiness. and everything, because he hated the life he was in. He's constantly in pain with headaches and things from the brain injury and things. And I'm taking a long 5 years, and I'm squashing it down really, really quickly for this. But he every time I would go home and to see him, I could see continually that he was very unhealthy and didn't seem like he was good anymore. He was continuing for a while to go to the meetings, and I'm sure he went out in service and things like that, but he got to a point where he stopped and he got very reclusive. And I saw him in August when I went home to spend some time with my mom and dad, who have never shunned me. We never got onto that. But even though I've walked away completely, my parents have never shunned me. And they have been very loving to Chad, to my children, and everything. And I'm thankful for that. And that's also one of the reasons why this is slightly scary for me to share openly like this is, my parents are in their 90s now, and I don't have much time with them left, but they have been willing to always love us and allow us to be part of their lives.
And can I say that's the minimum that they should be doing anyway? In other words, you don't get a gold star for loving your kids. You're supposed
Right,
to.
right,
So, like,
exactly.
that's awesome, and I'm glad you guys have
No,
that.
you're
But
right.
it's wonderful, but you don't like suck as a person because you're not a Jehovah's Witness or something, and so therefore their
Yeah,
love is so much better because you're so bad or something.
right.
They're supposed to love you and be there for their grandkids.
They are right.
That's minimum daily allowance. Like, you're supposed to do that.
Right, exactly.
So
And
I'm glad that you were able to have that.
and for those who aren't, who aren't witnesses or ex-witnesses listening to that, that's why it doesn't make sense. Like, of course they should,
Yeah,
but actually, of course they shouldn't. In our situation, they shouldn't,
right,
because but should they, as
right.
human
And
beings? Of
mhm,
course they should. Should my brother, who lives across this, next door, should
yeah,
he be in my life? He
of course.
should. But it's been 34 years and he's not.
No,
He's
that's the
chosen
Jehovah's
no.
Witness way. Well, it's
Yeah,
Jehovah's Witnesses, but as you're saying, also it's individual personalities plus Jehovah's Witnesses. You can't just blame Jehovah's Witnesses because your parents are witnesses and can be in your life, but your brother's not.
right. Yeah.
So there's some personal accountability there for how we
There
all,
there
how
is.
people execute that.
There is. I agree. Yes, for
It's
sure.
interesting. So,
Yeah.
what happened then with David?
So I went home to see my parents, and David and I had plans to go do something, as I just wanted to go have a brother sister day with him. He
Mhm.
said okay, and then, like, he just went non-existent, and I don't know. But when I saw him, I was like, he looks awful. He looks terrible. Like, and I even said to my mom, "What's going on and with him?" So why he looks sick. And she's like, I don't know. The brothers have tried talking to him and this and that, and I just don't know. I said, all right, well, November, the last text um, my mom and dad were taking me to the airport, and he texted me and he says, have you left? And I said, I have. And I said, I'm sorry I missed you. And he just said, I love you. And I said, I love you too. And um, November came, and I was at a baby shower for my daughter-in-law, and my mom called. She knew I was at the baby shower, and she's like, she said, I'm very sorry to call you, but I need to call you. And she said, David is dead. And that was just absolutely heartbreaking, for me. And I'm just going to speak to the reality of it. He had been very distant from my parents, and then they somebody who he was every day going to this corner store where he could buy himself a meal and buy himself some alcohol, some beer. He drank. Okay. And so every day he went and he did that. And one day he came in and the girl knew him, and he was acting odd to her. He was acting actually as though he seemed as though he was going to walk out and steal the food that he had, which my brother had money. He had no reason to do that. But anyways, he ended up paying for it or whatever. And that person knew that David was a Jehovah's Witness and knew that my parents were. And she saw somebody came into that store later that day who was a Jehovah's Witness and said, "Hey, this is just really weird. I saw Dave and he did this and it just seemed weird. And I think somebody should check on him." And so that person called my mom and dad. And my mom said to my dad, "Somebody should do something. You need to go check on him." And that was Saturday night. And so my dad said, "All right, well," the next morning was Kingdom Hall. They went. My dad talked to two of the brothers there, said XYZ about Dave. And they said, "Okay, well, let's all go and just go check on him later as soon as the meeting's over." And my dad and mom live about 2 miles from the Kingdom Hall. David lived close by the Kingdom Hall. So my dad drove my mom home. Those two brothers went to my brother's house and they knocked. He didn't answer, but there was a broken window and there was blood on the window. And they called my dad and said, "Something is up." And so my dad immediately left his food, because he is eating a quick lunch, went down. And when he got there, there was, he broke into the house, and my brother's house was a mess. And he went in and he looked around for him, did not see my brother anywhere. But as he was starting to wake his way back out, he saw the couch, and on the couch was a ton of blankets. And he saw something that looked odd at the end, and he pulled it back a little bit and realized it was my brother's. My brother was under this huge mound of blankets, and he was cold. And so he immediately went outside and he called the marshal, and who came and did not touch anything. And they pulled back the blankets, and my brother had shot himself with a shotgun and ended his life. He, unknowing to us, my brother had cirrhosis of the liver, and he was in very, very bad state. And he was very sick. But at the same time, he was not being checked on, cared for anymore. He wasn't going to the Kingdom Hall, whatever. And it was very awful. It was very, very awful way to find him.
Sorry.
And but I went home, and obviously my husband and my two sons came later, and we helped my father clean out his house. And I came across his cell phone, and I took it. I don't know why. It was just, I could have anything in that house I wanted, but I saw it and I'm like, this is the last thing he's got. And I went home, I plugged it in and I charged it up. And after I went home to Georgia, and I started going through the text messages, and a week before, one of the elders had texted him and said, how's it going there, Dave? How are you doing? And he said, I feel like killing myself. And he said, oh, don't say that. Just get up, come to the Kingdom Hall, and go out in field service, and you'll feel better. And that was it. That was the care they gave to a child who'd been in that hall for 50 years. That was the care that they gave to
That's
him.
the care they would give their own child. It's
Right.
unfortunate. They just don't believe in anything other than performance inside of JW activities fixes all.
I
And
was
I'm
like,
so
I
sorry.
wish when he and I talked, because we talked 4 days before, I wish that he would have said, I feel like killing myself.
They may not
Because,
have that day.
right, exactly. I just wish that it would have been somebody who would have said, took it seriously, that he was so sick. And but they chose that was how they chose to help. My mom didn't know that anything, and I let her know this summer, because my mom, I mean, it's a terrible hurt that she has to know that her child committed suicide, misses him. And of course, because of that, he couldn't have a Kingdom Hall funeral, which was, embarrassing again for them, and because of the rules and the stupidity of it and whatever. But
I think that if your kid has been hurting so bad, I mean, very blunt. I think that if your kid is hurting so bad that that they have taken their life, um, and you walk away with embarrassment at how it's handled in the congregation, there's a problem there.
there is, right? There is.
That, and I'll say that as wide-eyed as I can, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
Yeah,
But my God, who
right,
fucking cares
right,
whether what the brothers at the hall think?
right.
You lost your son.
Exactly. And they
That's the
should
only
have,
thing that matters.
exactly. And it should have, but it wasn't their choice. That's where they wanted to have it, but it wasn't their choice. And
I mean,
they're,
that shows the monstrosity that is Jehovah's Witnesses, and they won't give funerals to people like that at times. No, actually, that's something they're changing. Again, not going to give them a gold star because you should do that anyway.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
your embarrassment should not even come into play.
yeah,
You shouldn't be embarrassed. You should be decimated that your son felt that way.
yeah, right. I told my mom, I said, I would like to do a eulogy for him, since it's not at the
Yes.
Kingdom Hall. I would like to be able to do something. And because an elder was going to be doing it, that was shut down. And he said he told her to tell me the reason being is because if I got up and I spoke, other people would think that it was okay to get up and speak and to share. And then you might get people who are, you know, otherworldly people coming and wanting to talk. And I looked at my mom, I said, have you ever been to a funeral that wasn't Jehovah's Witness? I said, nobody does that. Nobody would ever just say, oh, I have the right to get up and speak. It's a place of solace, and
It's a place
but
to celebrate the person
right.
who's no longer with us, not a
Yeah.
sales pitch for a religion.
It's
And it's
not
a
an
place where
open mic
even
night.
women can speak. Imagine that, a woman getting up and eulogizing or
Right.
speaking about someone that she cared about.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is why they
So
don't grieve properly. It's
no,
sad.
they don't. They don't. And on that, the second part of that was, my brother Bob, he picked me up at the airport to come to that, and he and I had this, special time together on our way back from, picking up, having lost our brother, and sharing together just a sweet day. Anyways, I'm thankful for that, because then COVID happened and I could not go home anymore. And during that time, my brother was diagnosed with cancer, and Bob, and ultimately it killed him. When he had I told the family, that my mom and dad specifically, I said, when we get to the point where he's got 4 to 6 weeks or whatever, I'm going to come home and I'm going to spend a week there with him. So please let me know when we're there at that point. And they let me know I was there. The time had come. I went home. I got in on a Thursday. I went to see him Friday morning. It was very rough. I thought to myself, if this is 4 to 6 weeks, I don't want to see what it's going to be like the day he dies, because he seems terrible. A little bit, I told him I was going to come back and see him a little later with his girlfriend, and I would spend the rest of the day with him, and that I was there for the whole week. And he was happy to hear that, but he was still like so bad off. And took my parents home. And you have to remember, my parents are very elderly right now. My parents are 90. And so my mom was in very poor health and losing both of her sons. And so the girlfriend called while we were eating lunch and said, hey, the doctor came in and said, really, Bob has about a week. We've gone really fast. He's digressed real fast. And then she told me, I'll be up to pick you up in about an hour. And I said, great. And I'll spend the whole day there, because my mom could only handle so much of it. It was so incredibly hard on her. So she could only go for short stints. Sure. And I was just going to go and be there. And then his girlfriend texted me and said, it's happening now. Come. And in that amount of time, he just dropped really, really fast. And my time with him, which was supposed to be a week or more of just sitting together talking, turned into hours. And he died that evening. And because of his life and how resentful he was of how he was treated, he did not want a funeral, because he did not want the Jehovah's Witnesses to have any part of it, which might have been what happened if my mom and dad had been involved in making any type of decisions or whatever. Not sure. But so that was it. There was no goodbye. There was there was just watching him die and staying with him while he did. All of his living siblings were there. My mom and dad and 2 of his daughters were there, but that was it. There was no life to memorialize him. It was it. And that just sucked really bad. My brothers were amazing people who just weren't given the chance to be really seen for who they are. And I think specifically David, the life, as Chad has said about Dave had a lot of demons that, I mean, and not in the form that the Jehovah's, but had a lot of demons that continually just took over and controlled his life, and he never got a chance to have a redeeming life, because he was constantly just put down and put down and put down. And I think he could have been more.
Sure, he didn't get to thrive because
he didn't get to thrive, and
trauma
yeah,
and such.
And I think that's the thing, is like with my brothers, it's like I am not going to allow what happened to them to happen to me anymore. I want everybody to, my kids, I have 8 grandchildren, and I want them to see me thrive. I don't want them. I want my children to have the life with their siblings and with cousins that I didn't get. I want them to have healthy relationships, and they do. And they're my best friends. They could never do anything that would make me turn my back on them. Ever.
And they don't even have to worry about it, do they?
They don't have to worry. And it's like if they never will have to worry. And they can know that everything that I constantly have their back. Their dad constantly has their back. That they are loved no matter what. No matter what they have done, they are loved. And they have been gracious to me, to their grandparents, when we have had their grandparents come, and we have been honoring of my parents in the things that they believe and how they would, I am respectful of my parents and their beliefs. And that's okay. I think everybody should be respectful of everyone and their beliefs. It's their belief. It's what they hold dear. And but
I'd say as long as their beliefs aren't hurting other people.
Exactly. And this is the point where I don't want it to hurt us anymore. I don't want it to have a conflict with us anymore. And has it? Yes. It has always affected my children. It has always affected my marriage. It has always affected me. But like, I like that thing that I read. It says the people who say you can't and who you won't are usually the ones scared that you will. And I'm going to do that now.
And you are.
That's me. I don't care. I care. But at the same point, my life, my kids, and who we are as a family is way more important, because our family starts here, and everybody else who is outside of it, that's your choice if you want to be outside of it. But we'd love to have you in it because we're pretty fun. Their uncles who are not in their lives, that's up to them. We're always welcoming. But
so I think that's a pretty good place to end it. But that you guys are fun and that you want to have a loving family, which I think is what we all want to have. But I'll make a point. You are the same girl that sat in that Kingdom Hall or whatever and watched okay, I think it was David. I'm trying
Yes.
to keep all this straight. You're the
Yes.
same
Okay.
girl that sat there and watched David and said, "This isn't love. This isn't loving. This kid needs somebody to support him. He needs family right now. He needs uh yeah, he needs to be seen for the totality of who he is and not this one moment, and he needs to be loved on." And you just did a wonderful job talking about your amazing brothers and how, despite the things that were in their lives or whatever, they deserve to be loved on. And I just want to point out that that's also you. And I think that now it sounds like you're turning that same love that you had for them. What if you turn that toward yourself? What if
Mhm.
you practice that same love, that same forgiveness, that same everything that you've always had for everybody else? And what if you put that same attention into yourself, into being this fully realized version of Jodi, and then your grandkids and your kids and Chad and your parents or whoever wants to see it and can appreciate it can see that. Imagine what you will be able to do when you are expressing yourself fully too, which this is part of. That
Yeah.
is awesome.